Okay. I think we're live on all platforms here, gang. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WhickTV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And today, we're going to be talking about Israel-Palestine. And I know, we've talked about this before. It's been done to death. But one, it's still a very important issue. It's very relevant, and it deserves space to be discussed. Two, since the last time we talked about this on this channel, there's been many new developments, both in the war itself, as well as within things like the ICJ releasing their report, the UN releasing their sexual violence report. There's been other things that have come to light that deserve their time in the sun, so to speak. Tonight, we're going to be covering a wide variety of issues regarding the conflict, including: is Israel perpetrating a genocide right now? Are they an apartheid state? Is the West's response to what Israel and Palestine are going through, is it appropriate? What are what would be an appropriate response? These things and more, right? We're gonna talk about that. But before we get too far into it, I do want to give a chance for my lovely guests to introduce themselves, kind of give an overview of their thoughts, and then we'll kind of just get into it. So I guess first we'll start with KevinLogan. KevinLogan, hello, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you, Mr. Wick?
So far, so good, but we haven't started yet. There's still plenty of time for things to go wrong. I'm here for it. What is your basic thoughts on the conflict? What do you think about Israel, the way
Yeah.
it's conducted itself, and about Palestine as a whole? Please go ahead.
Yes. I honestly think that the current onslaught, is the way I will describe it, is will be remembered as one of the truly great crimes of the 21st century. Even, I think it's a disgrace, a scar on humanity that needs to be come to a conclusion very, very soon. My basic position is that I'm not a Zionist, and I'm not a Zionist for the same reason that I'm also not a white nationalist or a Hindu nationalist or anything of that sort. I think the idea of ethnic or religious supremacist states is immoral, unethical, and ultimately counterproductive in the long run. Um, I think we'll probably get into it at some point during the discussion, but obviously the things that happened on October 7th were a disgrace as well, and terrorism. Innocent people were butchered and murdered. That does not, however, it seems to me, justify the killing of many tens of thousands of more people on the other side who are also largely innocent, even if one side wants to define all men in the area of between the ages of 15 and 40 or whatever it is as enemy combatants. They are not combatants. They are innocent people who just want to go about their lives. I think undoubtedly Israel is engaged currently in a genocide in the Gaza Strip, and indeed ethnic cleansing in both the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. I think they are an apartheid state, and we'll get into the specifics of all of that as we go along, but that's basically my position.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here, and I'm eager to see how this plays out. We appreciate you. Next up, Quibbles over Coffee. Same thing. Introduce yourself, tell people who you are, and kind of just outline your position on Israel, Palestine, and the conflict as a whole, please.
Sure. So I'm my name is Quibbles slash Jonah. I don't know, whichever one you want to do with. Um uh yeah, so since October 7th, I've obviously had to give this a lot of thought. Um and I think that the problem that I keep on coming to is that I think that there are certain terms that are used imprecisely in order to get to a broader sort of moral push, and I think that that is a somewhat dangerous thing to do when you use those terms in a way that is too loose. I think that we wield the term rape in a very specific sense, and there's a reason there's a difference between rape and sexual assault. There's a reason that there's a difference between ethnic cleansing and genocide. There's a reason that there's a difference between violence and even violence that is indefensible. and violence that is an ethnic cleansing, and violence that is a genocide. And so I want to be clear that when I say that something isn't a genocide, that doesn't mean that I'm defending it, number one. But number two, I also think that I'm concerned about the conversations that we have about Israel Palestine often being about defining terms and being about trying to figure out, who we're going to condemn and how we're going to condemn them, rather than trying to move forward. I think it's a very easy thing to do as someone who is even remotely at a cursory level uh, conscious of what's been happening in a situation as complicated as this one, to spend 15 hours condemning Hamas in 15 different ways, or spend 15 hours condemning, certainly Bibi Netanyahu and other members of the Israeli parliament. And I think that that's ultimately not as useful as trying to figure out what our steps forward are. And so my hope is that we're going to be able to have a conversation that's ultimately trying to move forward and ultimately trying to get to a point where we're actually figuring out how to take those steps.
Okay, I guess. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate that, and yeah, hopefully we can. I think the semantic discussion has its place, but hopefully we can kind of agree on some basic facts on the ground so we can move forward. I guess I'll start by asking you both, and again, this is just an open question to kind of spark discussion. To Kevin first. Obviously, you are not okay with the response from Israel after October 7th. My question would be, what would you have Israel do now? If you were king of Israel, right? If you were the head of the parliament there, what do you think would be the moral or ethical or right choice for Israel moving forward? Can you lay
Well,
that out?
firstly, if I were the leader of the Knesset, there would be various genocidal lunatics in that body that I would remove from that body for the good of all people. But regardless, that's a rather minor point. What would I have Israel do? Ultimately, in the same way that the situation in Northern Ireland was never sorted by violence, albeit it was pushed along by violence, of course, people need to get around the table and talk. That's the only way you can have a peaceable solution to this. However unpalatable that is. And we heard the same talking points about we don't negotiate with terrorists, we don't sit down with the IRA, etc., from the same government who were surreptitiously doing exactly that. Because that's the way it goes. You have to have A, talks, and B, good faith from both sides. On some level, obviously, you can have animosity. And unfortunately, you see in both Hamas and the sort of Likud religious bigots, frankly, no good faith at all. Neither Hamas nor the Israeli government actually want a solution to this, fundamentally. Bibi Netanyahu definitely doesn't want an end to the war, because as soon as that happens, he will be kicked out of office. And he knows that, and so he's going to continue doing this regardless. Hamas know that should the war go in the way that they don't want it to, or if they're forced to give up their only bargaining chip, which is these poor, innocent fucking people who are being held hostage, they lose their power, they lose their base, and they're going to ultimately be wiped from the stage, albeit they're not going to disappear completely, but they will cease to be the government, functioning or otherwise, of Gaza. And so, ultimately, the negotiations that might be going on, or might not be going on in the near future, ultimately won't reach the conclusion that humanity needs them to reach, because Hamas don't want to see peace, and the ultra-Zionist freaks who currently run Israel don't want to see a two-state solution. They have made their mind up conclusively that they wish to, from the river to the sea, Israel is all there will be, and that's their position, and they're going to do that regardless. Because whilst, of course, we've been focusing a large part on the Gaza Strip, the settlement, encroachment, the stealing of both land and houses from Palestinians in the West Bank has continued. Not just unabated, but has actually increased. We've seen literally arms being given by the IDF to random fucking people in the West Bank to violently extort housing and land from Palestinian people. You need a good faith actor on behalf of Israel. Otherwise, this will just continue ad infinitum, and piece by piece they will destroy any chance of there being a two-state solution, which is the only chance for a lasting peace ultimately. So yeah, both the government of the West Bank and the government of Israel need substantial changes, which may or may not be possible or may not happen. But then you actually need two parties to sit down who actually want a solution, and unfortunately, we have neither of those things at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Go ahead.
oh, yeah. So I certainly agree with you that definitely we need to be figuring out what it looks like to get to peace. Um, I also agree with you that I don't think that Bibi Netanyahu is capable of doing that himself, and that he needs to be out of power. I want to be clear, democratically out of power, which I think is quite likely in the relatively near future. Not in the next 6 months, but in the next year and a half, 2 years. I also would say that Hamas, which literally in its charter says that every Jew, myself included, needs to be dead, is also not capable of this kind of thing. So if we're trying to get to a point, first, do we agree that we're trying to get to a point where both Bibi and Hamas are not part of this negotiating table?
Yeah, no, that's literally what I meant. Yeah, we
Sure.
need
Okay.
two good faith sides, and we have no good faith sides.
Awesome. So if that's the prerequisite of being able to get to peace, how do we get Bibi Netanyahu out of power, and how do we get Hamas out of power?
Bibi Netanyahu, it's like you say, as soon as the war, as I said, and I think you would probably agree, as soon as the
Mhm.
war ends, he will be removed, and
Mhm.
hopefully will go to jail for his many and varied corruptions.
Quite likely. Yeah.
Um, but so that will happen. But the problem then you have is that he'll just be replaced by another ultra Zionist, because
Yeah, but
that's
I'm
the
just
way
asking,
unfortunately this is set up.
but I'm asking, like, at a base level, the way that one could get Bibi Netanyahu out of power would be
Hmm.
democratic at a base level, right?
Yes, yeah.
And at a base
Yeah,
level,
I'm
the
sure that I
way,
don't know the constitution, but yeah, there'll be some sort of
sure.
mechanism
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
remove him. Yeah.
And then at a base level, the way you get rid of Hamas is what?
Um. Ultimately, it's. I mean, this is hurts me to have to say, but it's sort of a kind of imperialist answer. Unfortunately, is that
Mhm.
you go in there and in the same way that, and this is the analogy that I've drawn a bit of flack for, but I think the way in which the initial stages of denazification after the Second World War happened. You go
Mhm.
in there and you remove these people from their possibility of engagement in normal civic society. So you would go in there and remove them as the government, because I mean, for a start off, there hasn't been an election there in a long time, so you can't
Yep.
really even argue that they have democratic legitimacy there. And of course, they have committed butchery on October the 7th and at various other points. So ultimately, they would need to be removed. People who have committed crimes need to go to jail, and people who have engaged in otherwise aiding and abetting these people need to have their either voting rights removed or something of that nature, so that you can then have a civic society. Part of the problem I have with the way in which Israel has responded is that the building of civic society in Gaza at the moment would be fucking impossible. They have
Well, let's just
seemingly
keep.
on purpose destroyed both housing, schooling. Literally, the Parliament building of
Okay,
Gaza
so if we
has
could,
been.
let's just keep
Hold
this
on. You
straight.
gotta let him finish. There'll be plenty of time to respond. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, which means that civic society at the moment is literally impossible. So the only peaceable solution you have for the removal of Hamas, and that peaceable is the only way you're going to do it. You're not going to bomb them out of existence, other than by literally exterminating all of the people there, which isn't going to happen. So you've literally, by destroying the towns, they did a controlled demolition on the fucking university building. They never even claimed there were tunnels underneath it. It seems that there has been a systematic flattening of
okay.
parts of
This
Gaza
is
in a
this
way
is a
that makes it
number of
impossible.
issues, but I just want to take this one at a time, right? So the first thing that you said there is that you believe that the only way to get them out of power, which is separate than the solution, but is a necessary prerequisite to the solution, right?
Yeah.
Um, uh, to get them out of power requires imperialism. What does that imperialism look like in your mind?
Oh God. I mean, I don't think Israel would ever accept this, but some sort of UN peacekeeping force on the ground or something like that, because I don't think the Palestinian people would allow peaceably for an occupation by the IDF, and I wouldn't trust the IDF to carry it out anyway, given the crimes that they've perpetrated. So you'd need some sort of international or third party organization to step in and essentially oversee that process, which Israel is never going to allow, because
So
as we've
let's
seen with not allowing the UN investigators in initially, and all the rest of it, and the fact that they've killed many UN workers in the region. They don't want an open Gaza. They don't want to see the
Okay,
world look at what they've done
let's
to
stick
Gaza,
on. Okay, so your answer is that you want to see a UN peacekeeping force on the ground in Gaza.
or something of that nature. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to argue against the idea of specifically the UN, and this is the reason. I think that
Okay.
the United Nations, in order to be able to be seen as an impartial party, has to be able to be, when we're negotiating for proper, I believe in a three-state solution, not a two-state solution. I think Gaza and the West Bank should be independent countries, but that's a different discussion. If we're going to get to a point where there's going to be an independent Palestinian country, whether it's one or two, um, that is going to require some sort of party that is neither Israel nor Palestine. And I would argue that the best option that we have available to us is the UN with a large amount of influence coming from specifically Saudi Arabia and Jordan. And so, because of that, I think that the UN needs to keep its hands clean. The reality of the imperialism, as you're describing it, is that it's going to be incredibly difficult. There are mistakes that are going to be made just inherently in it, and even to the degree that it is done as best possible, it is going to be massively unpopular. I'm sure you would grant. I'm much more
Yeah.
comfortable allowing that to be something that is on the hands of the Israeli government, and that is part of that negotiation because it allows the United Nations to keep its hands clean. Does that make sense?
So you'd need. Hang on. So you think that the Israeli government occupying Gaza during the
Mhm.
rebuilding of the buildings they destroyed
Yep.
would be a solution to the situation? You think the
I still don't think
Palestinian
it's a
people
solution.
would be
I
okay
don't
with
I
that?
don't think it's a solution. I think that it's a necessary first step. If you're asking this
Okay.
question of the United Nations as occupying force or Israel as occupying force, and those are the two options that you're voicing, I would argue that Israel is occupying force, though to be clear, a horrible, 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 though I think necessary moment in history, which we should very quickly try to move past and try to move forward through. Um, I think is better than having the United Nations take on that role.
Well, that's. I mean, it's fundamentally unworkable. An occupation of the Gaza Strip by Israeli forces, who again, you're asking them to oversee the rebuilding of buildings they purposefully destroyed, that they needn't have destroyed, digging up the corpses
Okay,
of people that they bombed. Like that's
okay.
not going to be a workable solution at all.
Okay. So I'm going to zoom out for a second. There's a broad problem. I said this at the beginning, but there's a broad problem where I don't want this to be a conversation where we're just rehashing the history of Israel Palestine, right? There are lots of ways in which Israel has messed up. There are lots of ways in which Hamas certainly has messed up, and even that the PLO has messed up, and that others within the Palestinian side of things have messed up. And
But
certainly,
what, I'm not rehashing
I'm
history. This campaign has happened since October. This is not
there are
like we're not going
certain
back to the Nakba or the
okay,
fucking 7 Day War,
your
any of
your
that
first
shit.
okay, Kevin, your first statement of how we can
Hmm.
move forward was that there
Yeah,
needs to be your this was your term, imperialism within Gaza, right?
on
Imperialism
some
is by
level, yeah.
definition very messy, and by definition, people die under imperialism, and by definition, it is an absolutely ghastly situation that I don't think either one of us are making light of, right?
Well,
But
no,
it
because
is the
that's why I
reality
asked
of
for
imperialism.
peacekeepers.
Hold on,
Because
hold
I'm,
on. Yeah, go ahead, Kevin. Explain. Right, like I guess for
yeah.
my because I'm at this point, I want clarification. When you say
Well, when I
imperialism, right?
say
What
imperialism,
do you mean?
I'm saying that mainly as a kind of I don't know, a reticent leftist who doesn't want to engage in imperialism on any fucking level. But given what the state that Gaza is now in, I don't see how you can do it without some sort of outside force doing something. You know, like it's literally rubble. The north, especially of Gaza, is doesn't
Sure,
exist basically as a livable space now.
I
So
fully
you
agree, and
need
that's
people to
why
go in
yeah.
there and rebuild because there's no. I mean, they
So
don't have
so
anything to
to
rebuild with.
for
Okay, so
clarity, just real quick
I
for
just wanna
clarity,
be clear about
stop
what I was saying.
quibbles, please. Just so I'm clear, you want an outside force. You mentioned the UN to come in to sit
Yeah.
on it to help rebuild. In the aftermath to make sure that Hamas is removed and they can rebuild without any shenanigans going on. Correct? Is that am I
Yeah.
getting
Exactly.
it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, quibbles. Okay,
So what
you've
I'm
mentioned. Let me ask my question first.
arguing
You mentioned that Israel would be a better idea when it comes to this than the UN would. Could you explain?
Yeah, so I'm not saying that the UN shouldn't be involved. The UN should be heavily involved. I think the UN is going to be needs to be actively involved in the rebuilding process, as does the United States, as does certainly Jordan and Saudi Arabia, and Israel, by the way. But I think that is separate than the question of what military is going to be occupying Gaza during this period of imperialism that you're describing, which I think is necessary in order to get Hamas out of power. And if we're
Well,
talking
that's
about the
what I mean.
military, well, if I can finish, if we're talking
Yeah.
about the military specifically, there is a massive danger, and this is true on the international stage because of the amount of attention that this is receiving. We don't want the United Nations, just more broadly, this isn't even in terms of Israel Palestine, but just more broadly, to be seen as anti-Muslim. And that is something that has been a problem historically for decades of the United Nations, and also, by the way, of it to be seen as anti-Jewish and anti-Israeli, which is a thing that is also seen on the other side. But in order for it to get garner that legitimacy, it needs to have clean hands going into the negotiations.
But okay, I mean, I understand where you're coming from with that. But do you think that anyone will have any faith whatsoever in a rebuilding slash de-Hamasification of Gaza being done by the IDF?
No, very little.
So
Extraordinarily little.
what? So why are you putting that forward as a possible
Because I
solution
think that
then?
it's the least bad option. It's a horrible option, but I think it's the least bad option. I think that what we should do is what I argued with Box and Destiny, and both of them yelled at me. But what I said
I can
was,
understand why they would. Yeah.
yeah. So what
So
I
you're
said, well, if I could finish explaining it, what I said is I think that we need to have Area C style control over Gaza established by the IDF, and once that's done, Area C of both the West Bank and also Area C of Gaza, which is say all of Gaza, would immediately have forced elections, in spite of what Hamas would obviously want them to have. And those elections, on paper, Hamas would be barred from, but realistically, Hamas-backed candidates would likely win them anyway. Once that's done, you'd end up having an Area B-style control, right? A situation where there's civil control by the Palestinian Authority. In this case, this Palestinian Authority would be separate from the existing Palestinian Authority, and that would be one component. And then the existing Area B and Area A of the West Bank, which is where the majority of
okay.
people
This is all.
would continue under Fatah control,
Okay.
and then you have a
This
one-to-one.
is
Well, if I can,
this is
if I can
mad
complete it,
madness. How
I
are you
just
going to
want
hold elections? They
to.
don't.
Okay,
There aren't any fucking places where people can live.
okay,
What would even be the districting in a place with no buildings?
there
How
are
are you going to
buildings.
hold an election?
There are buildings in Gaza.
There are huge settlements that don't exist anymore. Where are you going to hold an election? Who the fuck lives there anymore? How are you going to
Kevin,
do any of this?
Kevin, is your claim that the 2.2 million people in Gaza, that every single home there was destroyed, that every single, like, you can't
No, no,
do
no.
an
I'm not. I'm
election,
not.
really?
I'm not. No, you can't have anything like a serious, credible election, given that
Kevin, okay,
significant urban
surely, okay,
settlements have been
Kevin,
so disrupted to the point where you couldn't even have a building with which to go and vote in.
I agree that tomorrow, obviously, we can't have an election. That's why I'm arguing for Area C style control to be established first as a
Okay.
prerequisite to having this election. Once you've gotten Area C style control, then you can have an election. But I'm arguing to have that election as quickly as possible because obviously, Area C style control within the West Bank, even, let alone in the case of Gaza, is obviously a ghastly situation to be putting the Palestinians through. And obviously, I don't support it, nor should anyone else. But I'm saying
This is.
that if you believe that Hamas is not capable of being part of the negotiation, and I agree with you, then we need to get to a point where there is a negotiating party on either side, which means getting rid of Bibi, which can be done democratically, and getting rid of Hamas, which unfortunately cannot be done democratically.
Well, yeah, I don't think Hamas can be necessarily removed democratically, but I said peaceably. I didn't say democratically. which unfortunately is, I suppose, where the imperialism comes in. But the problem, there's so much wrong, by the way, with what you're saying here. I don't even know where to begin. Firstly, getting rid of BB isn't going to be anything like a solution to the problem. He's going to be replaced with someone who's just BB light,
I didn't
which
say it was a
doesn't take us
solution.
anywhere.
It was a
Hold on.
No,
Quibbles, you got to give Kevin a little bit of time here. So we're going to let
yeah,
Kevin get interrupted for a little bit. Okay, go ahead,
Okay.
Kevin.
No, I apologize. Go
yeah.
for it.
So it sort of almost doesn't matter if Bibi is removed because the policy of the Israeli government fundamentally won't change, which is that they essentially see themselves as superior, which is why I've described them as an apartheid state, and I think they absolutely are an apartheid state. They've literally, I've got the wording of the exact law where it says, where is it? Apartheid. The citizenship law banning the naturalization of Palestine. Oh, there we go. The right to exercise national self-determination in Israel is unique to the Jewish people. They're essentially an ethnic supremacist government. That's what you have in Israel right now. And so you can't have a negotiation with a government which fundamentally will never accept a Palestinian state, which is currently the situation we have in Israel. So if you get rid of the talking head, which is Bibi Netanyahu, and replace him with virtually the same thing, that doesn't take you anywhere forward.
Okay, when
You
I
see what I
say that
mean?
getting rid of Bibi Netanyahu is a prerequisite to peace, I'm not
Hmm.
saying that the moment that you snap your fingers and he's gone, everything is hunky dory. I'm saying it's a prerequisite. I'm saying it's impossible until
Okay.
he's gone. I'm saying
Well, that is
similarly
true.
that until Hamas is gone, peace is impossible, right? And so when I say that the solution to getting rid of Bibi Netanyahu is democratic, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden, once we have someone else in position of power, and I mean already it's a shared power system. But once he's truly out and in jail or whatever, that doesn't fix the problem, but it's a
Yeah.
prerequisite. And I'm saying Hamas gone is a prerequisite, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
so
The
so
broader
again,
the
go
you go
for
on.
it.
Sorry.
Yeah, so again,
Okay.
so if we're going to say that those are the two prerequisites, then
Mm.
my solution, which to be clear is not a solution to the whole problem, it's not going to fix everything, but if we're trying to get rid of Hamas, I think that the though horrible solution that I can think of, but the best one available to us is to say that IDF gets all of the massive flack, which already there's massive flack. They have no credibility, the IDF, within Palestinian circles already. And so I don't know why you're shrugging your shoulders. It's not like even the Palestinian Authority, let alone Hamas, has any credibility within Israeli circles,
No, no,
right?
but
That's just
the
an
point
obvious.
is, you're. The reason I would throw my hands up there is because you're literally saying the solution I'm proposing has no credibility,
No, I'm saying the IDF has no credibility among
and you're
Palestinians.
suggesting they have full martial law
I'm
in
saying
the
that
initial
that is
stages.
I'm saying that that is the least bad option in the interim for a very
It
short
isn't an
period of
option.
time in order to get rid of Hamas, which are active terrorists.
Can you
I'm not
It isn't an
Quibbles?
that it's
option.
something
It
that is
isn't.
something that
It
I'd be
isn't
comfortable
an
with for
option.
15, 30 years. Obviously not. I'm saying
But it isn't
immediately
an.
we want
It,
to get to an
it
area of
isn't
ease
an option.
conflict where they're no
Not just
longer in
within.
control over civil
Okay.
matters.
Okay.
Not just in terms of Palestine, but in terms of the world. The world has watched as the IDF has committed
Okay,
serious fucking war crimes, man. They
Kevin.
have no credibility. The
Okay.
idea that any rebuilding process, any democratization of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, sorry, overseen by the IDF would have any credibility on anywhere on Earth. It just
Okay.
wouldn't. It would be seen as the fucking farcical joke of imperialism that it
Kevin,
clearly is.
the point the
The
point
oppressor in this situation that has literally walled off Gaza for fucking 20 years now, near enough. The idea that they're going to oversee the rebuilding of the buildings they killed so that people whose
that's
relatives
not what
they've
I
just
said.
fucking murdered are going to
That's not
move
what I
back into
said.
them and hold an
That's not
election.
what I said.
It's pie
Kevin,
in the
hold up.
sky
That's
at
not
best.
what I said. I didn't say that they should be overseeing the rebuilding of these homes. I said they should be overseeing the election, that they should oversee the military matters. I'm saying immediately, as soon as that the military issue of Hamas is handled, that and I want to be clear, that doesn't even mean destroying Hamas completely. It means getting them out of military control over the daily
Yeah,
lives of the Gazan people. Once they're out of military control, immediately there should be an election called, and immediately civil control should be ceded to a newly established Palestinian Authority, which realistically would be ruled by candidates who were primarily backed by Hamas, unfortunately, because that's where the majority
Quibbles.
power, democratic beyond just military, exists within the
Two
Gazan people.
two
Yeah.
questions for you, Quibbles, on that, just from my understanding of what you're
Yeah.
proposing here. One, how long would you guesstimate the removal of Hamas from military control would take
Mhm.
if we implemented your solution? Are we talking a year? Are we talking months? Are we talking a decade? What are we talking?
Yeah, the answer is I don't know, and the answer is that it
Okay.
takes longer if we are, unfortunately, sort of tying the hands of the Israeli government from
The
being
second
able to
question,
go through the
sure.
military situation. Yeah.
Second question, just for clarity, is
Mhm.
again, as you said initially when you proposed this idea that a lot of the candidates would be Hamas backed during the election. What is to
Mhm.
stop the same cycle from repeating and going just over and over again? How is this an actual solution? I'm
Absolutely.
trying to
Yeah.
understand.
Absolutely. So the reality is that once democratic rule is established or reestablished within the Gaza Strip, that the majority of the people do support Hamas at this moment, and because of that, they will have control over civil matters, and then we will have a very clear one-to-one comparison between the areas that are currently controlled by the Palestinian Authority, which is to say Fatah, and the areas that are going to be controlled, and in both cases will be civilly controlled but not militarily controlled, by what is technically not Hamas but is realistically Hamas. And that one-to-one comparison, I think, will very quickly, particularly with the help of the Jordanians, and particularly with the help of Saudi Arabia in particular, which is going into October 7th, arguably the reason that Iran wanted October 7th to happen in the first place, and why they sort of pressured Hamas into doing it, was because they were concerned about increasing the
Okay.
strong relationship between Saudi Arabia
No,
and
just
Israel. And so, well, if I could finish it. And so, when Saudi Arabia is able to give money and aid of other forms to the Area B, existing Area B, which is to say within the West Bank, under the control of Fatah, those people, those Palestinians, are going to see a marked improvement in their quality of life. And when you have another election 4 or 10 years down the line, my hope would be that seeing that differential, that Fatah will increase in its support within the rest of the Gaza Strip and the rest of the West Bank.
no, just this. I don't even know where to start. Pie in the sky barely covers the weird nonsense of this situation, but I do just have to push back on one point at least. The idea that you have just espoused, which I think is there's no evidence for whatsoever, that there's did you say majority or vast majority, whatever, of the Gazan people support Hamas? I don't know that there's any evidence for that whatsoever. You act as if it would be guaranteed that their candidates would win in an election. Again, I don't see any evidence for that whatsoever. They barely have food there, let alone polling organisations. So I don't know how you can
I would
possibly
be,
know that.
yeah, I would be very happy if they didn't, but I'd be very surprised if they didn't.
Well,
If they didn't,
fundamentally,
then what I'm
therefore, I think
suggesting
you
I'm sorry.
should fundamentally oppose the actions of the Israeli government because
No, but
if
Kevin,
anything's likely to radicalize the people of Gaza, it would be bombing their
okay.
cities flat.
If Hamas didn't win the election, then what I'm arguing for would be a better argument, because
The
what I'm
election,
arguing for would be much faster, because once there was an election and once there was Area B style civil control under this newly established Palestinian Authority, then it would very quickly be able to get increasing legitimacy, and it would be
Okay.
able to maintain itself
this is
independently.
the thing you're arguing for isn't going to happen. This is nonsense.
I
So
do
Okay,
look,
know.
Kevin,
it doesn't
Kevin,
matter.
Hold
It
on.
Kevin,
doesn't matter whether you think Hamas have
the
majority
answer.
support or not.
Okay,
The
the
thing
statement.
you're arguing for
The thing.
is
Okay, hold on.
Hold on, both of you, please.
Can I just
We are circling the drain on this a little bit. I do want
I'm
to
happy to move forward. Can I just address the "it won't happen" point?
concisely, and then I have another question.
Yeah, the statement "it won't happen" when we're talking about what ought to happen isn't useful. You're saying that, like, politically it's not like, okay, maybe it isn't likely, but that's not an answer to the question of what we ought to do. It's a question of what will happen. If you're asking what will happen, it's going to be very different than what I think ought to happen, but I'm arguing what ought to happen,
okay,
right?
okay. What I think ought to happen is that the IDF need to get the fuck out of occupied territory. You need to
Okay,
remove all of the settlements from the West
Kevin,
Bank. these things need to fucking happen. But again, is that going to happen? No. So it's not
Kevin,
useful to just fucking
okay.
say it as if it's just going to happen overnight.
That is
That's what I
exactly
mean.
that is exactly what Israel over a decade and a half, close to 2 decades ago, did in the Gaza Strip, and the result we see currently, right? The
And
result is
did they build?
not.
Hang on, are you going to ignore the wall and the functional blockade and the fact that it's been an open air prison ever since?
I'm sorry.
Because that bit seems like quite an important part of the story. That you can't just act like they just moved out and we allowed them to live peacefully and free. It's shite. You're just talking rubbish.
You just argued for a cleansing of all of the Jews living in the West Bank, which happened in Gaza. You just argued
No, not
for a
cleansing. A returning of the homes that were stolen from people. That's what I'm asking.
I'm sorry. So you're not saying all of them. You're saying the ones that are
I'm
not in
sure
settlements, but are
I would
rather in
be
outposts.
perfectly happy with
Kevin, if
Jewish
you're
people
talking,
living
okay,
in a
Kevin,
free
Hold on. You gotta
Palestinian
let
state.
Kevin go.
That's
Kevin, go
wrong.
ahead.
Okay, I'm not arguing that. I'm not the one who's. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying you are an absolute Zionist or whatever. But there are lots of people who are essentially Jewish supremacists in this, and I'm sure there are Arab supremacists as well. And all of those people can fuck right off. I'm not arguing that people can't live in any X, Y, or Z area. But what I'm saying is the Israeli government and settlers that they have enabled and emboldened and
You're
literally
using the term
armed in
settler,
recent
but you
times
don't mean it.
have.
You mean members of the outposts. That's a different thing. An outpost
I-
isn't the same as a settlement. If you're
Okay,
talking about stolen, hold up. If you're talking about stolen housing, you're talking
yeah.
about outposts. Those are not
Okay,
just illegal.
outposts
Hold
then.
up,
The
hold up.
people in
Those are not.
outposts need to be
Wait, let me
fucking
finish.
removed.
Let me finish.
Yes.
Those are not just illegal according to the UN. Those are illegal according to Israel. If you're talking about the outposts, right? Those are the parts
And
that are
what are Israel
stolen,
doing to stop
and
that?
they have taken out many of them. There've been very recent ones. There was one in like 2019 that they took out, right? But if you're talking about the overwhelming majority of Jews who are living in the West Bank, they don't live in outposts. They live in settlements, which are not the same. Settlements are rightly purchased land. They're not the same.
When you say rightly purchased, who are they rightly purchased from, and
From
under what legal
Palestinians,
framework? But under what legal framework? Are
under
they
the
working from
Israeli
within
framework.
under the Israeli framework? So under the state, which literally says that they have the right to govern all of this fucking area, that
That's not what Israel says.
don't allow. It literally says the determination of solely of the Jewish people. Okay,
No,
it will not
it
allow
doesn't
a
say
Hold on.
free
Stop.
Palestinian government to enforce
not
its
true.
laws in the area, which would undoubtedly have
established-
protected that land from being
That's
sold
not
to
true.
people who want to continue the further expansion of
That's not
Zionism in that
true.
area.
Okay,
That's not true.
just a little housekeeping here. I understand you disagree with the point, and you can absolutely, and I encourage you to make clear your disagreement, but you gotta let him finish his point before you do that, so we can actually understand what he's saying, because it's hard to hear when you're
That's
both
fair.
shouting over each other. I just can't.
You're right.
Okay, so
I understood what he was saying, but for the audience, you should say
yeah,
it again.
I
I'm sorry.
absolutely. It's
Okay.
very hard. So just
Okay,
let him
I'm sorry about that.
speak,
You're right.
please, and then
Yeah.
you can rebut, and I will make sure that he doesn't interrupt you until and we can go back and forth. But we need to do that, or else it's gonna get
I
impromptu.
sometimes forget that there's an audience, so I'm sorry.
Sure. No, it's
Kevin,
fine.
go for it.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so-
fine.
I heard it, but go
So
for it.
yeah, so the land was bought under an Israeli legal framework from land that would have been and should have been within inside the boundary and therefore legal remit of a independent Palestinian state, which undoubtedly would have protected against the encroachment of Zionist forces in their region because they have very little land to begin with. The piecemeal ethnic cleansing by "I've just bought it, it's mine, bro, fuck you" is no real better. It's just a longer term, bit by bit genocide. That's what's happening there. Okay, I don't give a fuck that you've got a piece of paper that says, "Look, I bought it fair and square." That's not how it should work, and not how it probably would have worked had there been a Palestinian state. You can't buy somebody else's land under laws that you have put in specifically in an ethnic supremacist way.
Okay, so there's a couple of things. The first thing is that when we're talking about settlements, which are, I want to be clear, different than outposts, we're talking about settlements. Number one, 90% of the population, the Jewish population living in the West Bank, is within a mile of the border. 90%, right? Number one. And then number two, they represent less than 1% of the landmass of the totality of the West Bank, right? All of the settlements represent less than 1% of the landmass. So when we talk about that, it is true that it is likely that some portion of those populations are going to, when eventually the West Bank is able to become an independent country, and Israel is able to be independent of it. When that happens, it is likely that certain settlements are going to be folded into Israel proper, and that there will also be land swaps, and that other components that are currently in Israel will be given to the West Bank, will be given to the independent
Yeah.
country of Palestine. And it is likely that as a component of that, there is also going to be a massive, in the billions, perhaps in the trillions, amount of money that is handed over to the Palestinians from the Israelis and from the international community more generally.
I would love
So,
to see that happen. I think
so
that's a very rose tinted view of how that would
okay,
go.
but I want
Also,
to
we would need to see the specific details of the
I
fact that
agree with you.
you're saying folding settlements into land and you'd have a land swap. Are they going to give them useful land or fucking desert? Or
It's going to
that
be a
sort of thing.
yeah, it's going to be a negotiation, and it's going to be a difficult negotiation. And obviously,
It's not
yeah,
going to be a negotiation of equals because one of them has nuclear weaponry. One of them has an army that they have literally shown will go in and fucking destroy buildings and destroy entire fucking towns if they want to. That's you know what I mean. It's not an equal. It's not a meeting of equals. There is it. Do you think they're going to get a fair deal out of that situation?
yeah,
And also,
I can't
this again,
any
this is to a degree pie in the sky because we're dealing with ultra Zionists who don't want that to ever happen. They will never ever accept a two-state solution.
okay. I agree that there are ultra Zionists. I agree that there is Hamas. But keep bringing up over and over and over, oh, Hamas exists, it can't happen. Oh, the ultra Zionists exist, it can't happen, isn't useful when we're trying to have a discussion about what could happen, presuming that first Bibi and Hamas are out of power, right? So if I'm saying something like these are land swaps that are conceptually possible, obviously I'm not saying that that's something that's going to happen under Bibi Netanyahu. I'm saying that there's something that's conceptually possible, right? It's
Okay.
a different step.
I do want to kind of
Okay.
ground this a little bit, because you're right. This is something in the far future, that may or may not happen. I want to get to something that's happening now. Okay. Recently, there's been calls. Since this has started, there's been calls for ceasefire, and I'm just curious to ask both of you. When you call, if you are calling for a ceasefire, and I'm not saying you are, if you are, what does that mean to you? What does that look like? And if you aren't, why not? That would be my question. And I guess we started with Kevin last time. We'll start with Quibbles this time, and then we'll see what. So ceasefire, yes or no?
Uh, Ceasefire, yes or no? There's sort of two questions built into that. One of them is, do I support the people who are currently calling for it? And the other is, do I conceptually support the idea of a ceasefire? Conceptually, do I support the idea of a ceasefire? Yes. But as prerequisites to a ceasefire, you'd have to, for example, give back all of the still held captive people that Hamas is holding. So if Hamas was willing to do that, and if Hamas was willing to give up their attacks on Israel, then yes, I would conceptually be in support of a ceasefire. But I think that often it is used as a form of sloganeering in order to imply that Israel shouldn't have any sort of response to what happened on October 7th and shouldn't try to actually genuinely fix the problem of Hamas. And I think failing to fix the problem of Hamas, yes, is a problem for Israelis, but is ultimately a larger problem for the Gazan people.
Okay, I'm curious to
Have the
Kevin.
Israeli government has the Israeli government not had enough of a response yet? Really?
You said that in
Like,
order to get, well, should I answer that or do you want to continue?
yeah, no, go for it. I'll say my
Yeah,
piece after. Yeah.
you said that you believe that the only way to get Hamas out of power is through some form of imperialism. We are not at a position where Hamas is out of power, and so therefore, I think that we need to get Hamas out of power if we want to get to a point.
Well, but I don't think it seems though Israeli imperialism is how we got to this situation in the first place. I don't
Okay,
see that more Israeli imperialism is going to solve the problem. But
okay,
regardless of that, let me just get onto the ceasefire point. I do support a ceasefire. I think a ceasefire without preconditions is the only realistic, well, at least a cessation whilst negotiations take place. A kind of a
Okay,
ceasefire basically.
just for my clarity,
For a
when you
long,
say without preconditions,
yeah,
are you saying just straight across the board, Israel and Hamas both stop, just no conditions or anything? Like,
yeah,
what is?
Yeah, just ceasefire. I presume at first would be a time one, so you'd say, look, I mean, Kamala Harris said 6 weeks, whatever, and then during those 6 weeks, you negotiate exactly how everything goes down. Um, I agree that all of the hostages need to be returned on both sides, and that's, I think, a point that gets missed in all of this. Hamas do have innocent people that they have, frankly, mistreated appallingly, it would appear. Um, and those people need to be returned, and some recompense needs to be made to them, frankly, by the world. Anyway, but Israel has held a lot of very innocent people as well. I'm not arguing about the Hamas terrorists that they hold as prisoners. That's fine. Seems a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But they have innocent people, including children, that they have held hostage for a very long time. It's been a consistent practice that they have engaged in, which the world has basically ignored. For instance, when we talk about hostage exchanges, it's not actually for terrorists by and large, it's for innocent Palestinians. So you're exchanging innocence for innocence, and on both sides, evil people are prospering at the exchange of innocent people. So I do support a ceasefire. And yeah, there would be no preconditions in the initial, and you'd negotiate in good faith. Again, I don't realistically see either side negotiating in good faith. Which you call me doom pilled if you will, but yeah, that's the way you get around it in the end.
I guess my frustration is I don't quite know what the I don't want to say what the point is, but like how what if it is your belief that neither side is capable or willing to negotiate, like where are you going from there?
I was going to make a very dark joke. Anyway, no,
I mean, like it's fine. You can make the
it's,
if that's actually your
it's
answer, it's a dark joke.
no, I was going to be facetious. It doesn't matter. I was going to say I'll go to a clinic in Switzerland, but that's anyway.
We'll talk about
No,
dark jokes. Fair enough. Healthcare
yeah,
in
exactly.
Canada,
There you
etc.
go.
Okay, go
You
ahead.
see what I mean? But yeah. Anyway, because it's all very doomery, right? I don't think both sides. This is the distinction I would make. I don't think it's both sides in the sense that the people of both Gaza and Israel, I don't think want to see a continuation of this shit. It's the evil pricks who are currently in control of both of those places that are the problem and need to be dealt with robustly, frankly, by the world governments, including Joe Biden and my own government, who have aided and abetted one side against the other. So that, yeah, I don't think it's not that both sides. It's not that they can't be governed. They can't have representatives who can get around a table and talk properly and actually hash this problem out. But unfortunately, the stranglehold that these ultra Zionist fucking assholes in Tel Aviv have is very, very strong, and they're not going to release that.
Like, therefore, what?
Therefore, what? A continuation of bloodshed. Unfortunately, I don't see a positive solution to this in the near future.
Uh-oh, Quibbles, is that me or is that you?
Okay.
No, he's roboting for me as well. So
Okay,
I'm roboting?
Yeah.
You were better for a
Am
second
I
there.
still robo?
I think you're good now. Try again.
Good? Okay. It's not useful, even if like it is always correct and never useful to say I don't know. And it is often correct and never useful to say doom or pill. Right?
Right. Okay.
And so like neither I don't know or doom or pill, like you're not wrong. Yeah, it's a horrible situation. I agree with you. It's a horrible situation. Like I don't know what to do with that. Like it's not useful when you're just like if you were combating my argument for this area C to immediate area B style system and you were saying here's this other solution that I would like to try that this might be a better option. I'd be like awesome, let's try to talk about what that is. But just simply having you be like no, that's a bad answer and not giving some other alternative like it's very difficult to argue for anything in the situation as difficult as this one. But it's near impossible to argue for something against nothing, if that makes sense.
Well, if I may,
Yeah.
if I
Yeah,
may,
go on, sorry.
because Kevin, as I understood it, did make an argument. He is for a ceasefire, right? He's for a cessation of hostilities. He doesn't think it's likely,
Right.
but he wants it to happen. Is
But
that
that's actually
correct?
not
Hold on, just real quick.
yeah.
Is that correct, Kevin? Did I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
So he's given you something. That's a solution.
But it's not a piece of justice, right? I think both of us understand the way to a piece of justice as being whether it's 2 or 1 states, Palestine having an independent country / countries, and Israel having an independent country / countries, right? And
Yeah,
so
but that's
if that's the
I mean
goal,
that
you're not actually
oh,
moving the ball forward towards that. You're just getting us back to October 6th, right?
I mean, yeah, I guess, but like that would be a better situation. You talk about what's
But it's
just.
not. It's not a better
The
situation.
continuation of the current situation is far less just. We are seeing
Wait, hold on.
unspeakable
I'm sorry.
horrors take
I'm
place
sorry.
here, and I know this is. I don't want to be just like too emotional about it, or whatever. But you can't mention words like justice and then argue in favor of the IDF having martial law over a place it's fucking wrecked. That's
I'm
not
not
fucking
arguing. I'm
justice.
not arguing in favor of that at all. I'm arguing that that is a prerequisite. That's very different than arguing in favor of it.
Okay, arguing that would be in any way or any way a moving the ball forward. It's not. That's just a continuation of Israel doing what it's already fucking doing.
If
It's
I were
it's
okay,
madness to
when we're
think that
talking
would
about
even
Kevin,
remotely work.
we're talking about
Yeah.
terrorists, right? We're talking about terrorists who have stolen
Yeah, we're talking about
literally.
Bibi Netanyahu. Yes. Yeah.
We're talking about terrorists who have stolen literally in excess of $11 billion from the Gazan people, Hamas. We're talking about people who don't even live in the same place. The same. I want to be able to call it a country, but I can't even call it a country realistically. Of
Mm.
Gaza, and they're just like living their dreams out in Qatar, and these guys are stealing everyone dry.
Okay, but I mean that's
And you know,
not an argument
people,
for like. And I know you're not necessarily making this argument, but you're roboting again.
Oh yeah,
Sorry.
Quibbles. Uh-oh. Is that me or is
is
that
my
him?
thing fucked again? I'm gonna
That's him because me and you can talk like so it's there's a
Okay.
connection
I'm
probably.
gonna go on
just
my
between
I
phone.
just want to
I'm
make
gonna
sure.
try it on my phone.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, while he gets that fixed, Kevin, give us so I guess to kind of frame this discussion a little bit, right? I understand. I don't even know if he can hear us yet. Quibbles, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Quibbles. I guess where I'm coming from here is I understand. Hold on.
Okay.
Sorry
We've
about
had
that.
a drop.
Technical difficulties, gang. We'll get it done. Okay. Hello. Can you say something? I don't know if I can hear you.
Yeah. Words. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
So I understand that this is a place you eventually want to get to, right? You've laid it out, but I want to talk specifically about the now, right? 30,000 dead is the number?
Yeah.
Something like that. You're saying a ceasefire is not something you'd be in favor of unless it made unless hostages released and all these other conditions.
I think
Kevin is let me finish.
Yeah,
Kevin is saying that he wants the hostilities to stop now, and then we can figure it out, right? Is that correct? So why is he wrong? Why is Kevin wrong?
I think he's wrong because what he's doing is he's getting us back to October 6th. What he's doing is he's making this so it's a situation where Hamas is going to continue to have control over the over Gaza Strip, where they're going to continue to be funded by Iran, where they're going to be, as is Hezbollah, as is the Houthis, continue to be getting more and more funding. The technology is only getting better and better and better. The ability for the Iron Dome to stop these weapons from coming in and from attacking civilians within Israel is only getting worse comparatively over time. And you look at the cost of its use every single time, that's not going down proportionately. And you look at the quality of life of the people within the Gaza Strip beyond just in Tel Aviv, which is also horrible, but particularly in the case of the Gaza Strip, it is simply untenable. I think that at a base level, we have to understand that October 6th was no picnic for either the Palestinians or for the Israelis. And if we're trying to get to figuring out a situation of actually getting to this justice,
Like, justice doesn't mean back to the 6th. Justice means trying to move forward and trying to figure out a path out of all of this,
Okay.
and that path out requires getting rid of Hamas.
Kevin.
Yeah, but the problem you're going to have, I think, is that let's look at it a different way. Getting back to the 6th in the short term is better than what we currently have. What we currently have is tens of thousands of people dead. What we have is people starving to death. People, the idea of fucking shooting at flour trucks and all sorts of unbelievable, unspeakable evils. When you posit pie in the sky notions of the IDF, the lovely IDF overseeing the democratic transformation of the Gaza Strip, but yet you then poo-poo the idea that actually maybe we could stop the fucking killing now and get back to the 6th, and then from that point try and build anything better than the fucking hell that we've experienced for the last 3-4 months. It blows my mind. There's an undercurrent of not dishonesty. I don't want to be rude there, but the disingenuousness to the argumentation here, because I get that you don't want to defend the actions of the IDF, but in essence, what you're planning here is just allowing the IDF the scope to continue doing what they're doing. So you're essentially arguing for a not blank check, but a continuation of what the IDF has been doing, which frankly is fucking genocide, which is a point we may get onto in a second. By extra steps, you're essentially dancing around the issue, which is, like I say, a little bit disingenuous.
Okay. So I just want to read some times if it's possible that we've already tried a ceasefire. June of 2008.
Who is we, by the way?
I apologize. We, as in between Hamas and Israel. So in 2008, June of 2008, Egypt brokered a 6-month ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. In January 2009, there was another ceasefire. In November of 2012, there was another
I thought
ceasefire.
you didn't want to relitigate the history.
I'm just
What's happening
pointing.
now?
I just want to point out this component of this, and then we can understand this broader point.
Yeah,
which is,
let Quibbles make his
November
point, and then
2012. There was another one in August 2014. There was another one in May of 2021, and yet still October 7th happened. So it's been well in excess of a decade and a half, and these ceasefires have been tried many times before. And these ceasefires clearly have not stopped October 7th from happening, and clearly have not fixed problems that are dealt with on a daily basis by the Palestinian people living under the control of the terrorist dictatorship of Hamas. So
that's interesting.
I'm not comfortable
framing.
I'm not comfortable.
Well, hold on. Let Quibbles finish, and then
yeah. So I'm not comfortable having another October 7th and having another of these horrible flare-ups that resume after October 7th in another year and a half. I want this to be the last one. I don't want this to happen again. And you're saying that there are 30,000 people dead already, and you're right, and that's horrible. But if the question is, do we want there to be 50,000 or even 100,000 dead now, or do we want there to be 30,000 dead today, and another 30,000 dead in 2 years, and another 30,000 dead in 2 years after that, and another 60,000 a year after that, and so on and so forth for the next 100 years? I think quite clearly that even if it's worse in the short term, that the better choice long term is to get rid of the undergirding problem, and the undergirding problem is Hamas.
No, the undergirding problem, Hamas are a problem, undoubtedly. But the undergirding problem, the core part of all of this problem is the cancer of Zionism is fundamentally the problem. Now,
I don't know what that means.
Hold on, stop.
Don't misunderstand.
Zionism, for my audiences, because a lot of people say Zionism and they mean a lot of different things. So when you say Zionism, what do you mean?
I mean the ethno-nationalist Jewish supremacist movement, which seeks, depending on exactly the interpretation, either the current borders of Israel or what's called Greater Israel, which involves parts of Egypt and Jordan and all sorts, or you can go to the very, very silly biblical extent that some theocratic Christians do, which is from the Nile to the Euphrates for some biblical fucking reason. Regardless of the exact geographic intent, it's essentially an ethno-state where basically only Jewish or mostly like 90% plus Jewish people can live, which is ultimately the goal of these ultra-Zionist people. Now, do not conflate Zionism with Jewish people, because there are two groups of people who do that. Neo-Nazis, who want to smear all Jewish people with blood libel, and ultra-Zionists, who want to drag all Jewish people into complicity with the crimes that they wish to commit against the Palestinian people. These are two cheeks of the same backside, and hopefully they're both spanked out of existence, or at least out of political power at some point in the near future. Regardless, that's what I mean by Zionism. It's an ethno-nationalist, imperialist, colonialist.
Sure, let him
endeavor.
finish his point though, Quibbles. I know you're rearing at the bit here, but he was getting to the point. Yeah.
So that's the point. It's the ultra-Zionism that I fucking despise about all of this. Because, for instance, we know that Benjamin Netanyahu has given initially tacit support to the existence of Hamas because it would take power away from the PLO.
Okay, when you're talking about the ultra-Zionist project, there is certainly a large portion. It is not a majority, but it is a large, noticeable, and very real minority of people within Israel proper who would like to see all of the West Bank be a component of Israel proper. That is true. It is not true that there is even a sizable minority of people within Israel proper who want Gaza to be part of Israel proper. That's not true, right? That hasn't been true for decades. And so it's frustrating that this is being
There were
conflated
people trying to rush in and do settlements, literally, as literally following the IDF into these now destroyed places, attempting to seize land in Gaza right now. That's a thing that's happened during the whole process, yeah?
It is a thing that has happened, but when we're talking
whether
about...
there's... I don't know the exact proportions.
You just went on a spiel. But if you're talking about the views of Bibi Netanyahu, even himself, let alone of the broader right wing of the Israeli people and of their politique, it's not true that is a broadly supported view or broadly supported movement in the way that it is for West Bank. So in the context of Gaza specifically, the reason for the Gaza specific problem is the issues of Hamas. It is a different situation than West Bank. And I don't think that the West Bank and Gaza should be conflated in this situation. If you want to talk about Zionism, you're talking about West Bank, I think that is valid. It is certainly a component of the problem. It's obviously not the whole problem, but it is a component of the problem. It is not the same in the context of the Gaza Strip.
Okay, I can't speak to the exact proportions of Israeli society. I don't have the polling on this, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a massive proportion of it right now. All you need is a relatively small number of people to begin the settlement process, and the same encroachment that we have seen in the West Bank can continue in the Gaza Strip.
It's against Israeli law. It has been against Israeli law for over a decade.
Yeah, there are lots of things that are against Israeli law that the Israeli government are happy to turn a blind eye to.
No, that's not true. There are, other than the Jews who were literally stolen from, who were kidnapped, there are otherwise literally zero Jews that were in Gaza prior to October 7th. Now there are the Jews who were kidnapped, and there are the Jews who are part of the IDF. And those are the only Jews in the Gaza Strip.
Okay, I mean, yeah, okay.
Okay, so it's not the same as the West Bank. So
I didn't say it was exactly the same, I don't particularly.
Okay,
it doesn't matter to me all that much the tactics that they're using, with whether it's direct ethnic displacement via bombing places and driving them into an area where you say this is a safe area, and then you continue to fucking bomb them, or whether you do piecemeal buying up of land under obviously unfair circumstances.
Okay. The point that I'm making is that I don't want to see a conflation made between what's happening in the West Bank and what's happening in Gaza. If we're talking specifically about what's going on in Gaza, you can't blame the Gaza situation on the Zionist project of settlements within the West Bank. That is certainly a part of the issue in the West Bank, but it's not
the overall
That's not
I'm
true.
saying the overall imperialist endeavor, which is Zionism, seeks control over all of that land.
But that's not true. They
At
don't
the very
seek control
least,
of Gaza.
all of what we now know as either Palestine slash Israel.
But I'm telling you, that's literally not true. There was a
It
large
literally is
proportion.
true for some of them anyway. I don't know the
Kevin,
specific
okay,
percentages, and it doesn't really
okay,
matter.
you're
But
right.
again,
And
they don't necessarily need to. Zionism as a project in general was very, very unpopular in worldwide Jewish sentiment up until obviously the Second World War, right? So you don't necessarily need a massive percentage of a thing in order to drive that wedge home bit by bit by bit. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Now we've seen a massive explosion in the rate of that in the Gaza Strip in recent times, because they've seized an opportunity, right? In the same way that George Bush seized an opportunity with 9/11 to go and do his fucking Iraq endeavors, right? It's a disaster-tunity for Zionists to go in and fucking continue their ethnic displacement and genocide of Palestinian people. And that's unfortunately what's happening. And then the Palestinian people are asked to sit around a table and negotiate with the people that are fucking murdering them. It's madness.
I'm sure I could find an example if I were to look at American, body politic. I'm sure I could find an example of people who believe that we should annex Canada or that we should, invade Mexico, right? But that is not something that is a broad problem, a broad view of either major party, right? If I wanted to hold up,
is the U.S. Army currently in Mexico?
I want to finish my point. If we're talking about the broad issues of the Republican Party in the United States, that is something that is reasonable to talk about. And it has to be categorized as this is something that many Republicans believe. They believe the last election was stolen. Lots of Republicans think that, right? It is not true that lots of Republicans think that we should annex Canada, right? It is true that lots of, not the majority, but lots of Israelis think that West Bank should be part of Israel proper. It is not true that a sizable proportion of Israelis believe that Gaza should be annexed. That's not true. So don't conflate those.
Your analogy would work, but for the fact that currently the US government and its armed forces is not flattening Mexico City. That would be a fair analogy in that situation. But unfortunately, it's not. Whether a significant portion of the Israeli population believe X, Y, Z is rather irrelevant to the point that they are currently occupying and bombing the fuck out of the Gaza Strip. So whether that has massive widespread support amongst the Israeli people, clearly the Israeli government don't give a fuck about the thoughts of the Israeli people, given that there have been literally riots to try and get rid of fucking Netanyahu, and the cunt's still there.
Okay, Kevin, during the Afghanistan war, the United States-Afghanistan war, do you think it would have been appropriate for someone to say that America was going to make Afghanistan a state?
No.
Of course not. You can say lots of stuff about what America was doing in Afghanistan, and a lot of it is appropriate. A lot of it is reasonable to say about what we were doing in Afghanistan. One of the things that you can't say is that anyone in America wanted to make Afghanistan a state. Again, I'm sure you can find random crazies on Twitter who were saying that shit, but it is not something that any sitting senators, it is not something that the broader American politic was encouraging for Afghanistan to become a state. It is not true that Gaza is something that Israel wants to be part of its country. That's not true.
Wick, you may remember this. Do you remember on the Hippy Dippy when I think it was critically thinking veteran literally proposed that they make Afghanistan a state?
Yes, but I don't think critically thinking veteran is not
a Twitter person.
No, I know. I was just reminiscing for a second. I wasn't making the serious argument that people actually want that to happen. Anyway, but the again, it's not really a reasonable analogy or whatever. And also, Afghanistan was also a fucking nightmare. Well, so I suppose in one respect,
I agree. That's why I took it. That's why I used it as an example. That's my whole point.
Okay, hold on. I think we're getting down a rabbit hole that we don't need to go down. I don't think it captures, I think, the essence of what Kevin is trying to argue here.
Don't mention rabbit tunnels. Fucking hell, the IDF will bomb me. Come on now.
My bad. Fair enough. Okay. Rabbit synagogues. Okay. We're gonna have
Yeah, rabbi. Rabbi is the plural of
rabbis.
rabbit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what Kevin is alluding to when we talk about the underlying problems when it comes to the situation in Israel and Palestine as a whole, he is arguing that the reason that this is all happening, the main causal factor, is Zionism as a movement, as a mind state. So regardless of the individual policies within Zionism, is that, as he outlined earlier, that ideology of Zionism is the one that is leading to all of this death and bloodshed. That is the major cause, not the only. I don't think he's arguing, but the major. Is that correct, Kevin? Am I?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, we can go back. We can go back
Sure.
to the very foundation of Israel. And ever since, long before Hamas were ever a thing, there was
But
bloodshed taking
before we
place.
do
And
that,
Zionism was the spark for all of that.
just to again, to ground this. So what would be your response to that when we talk about the underlying problems with Israel Palestine, the base foundational issues? Do you agree or disagree that Zionism is the pillar upon which it rests? And if not, if you disagree, what do you think is, please?
I think the base problem is that there is one Jerusalem, and that there is a very long history of Jews first being ethnically cleansed out of what is modern day Israel and modern day Judea and Samaria or West Bank. And then there is a long history of Palestinians being oppressed in the same context. There's a long history of imperialism by the British. There's a long history of, go down the list.
Now, we didn't do nothing wrong. What are you talking about? We're blameless in all of this. How dare you?
Certainly, America did nothing wrong ever. America's done nothing wrong.
True.
And and so rightly, when people are growing up as Israelis or as Palestinians and as Jews or Muslims more generally, the stories that we tell ourselves, and those stories aren't untrue, they're just slanted. They're just stories that are focusing on our own strife rather than the strife of the people who are also being harmed. Those are stories that are seemingly in contradiction. And I think that is something that can't be fixed by simply, screaming about how horrible Hamas is or screaming about how horrible, Bibi Netanyahu is, even though those things are perhaps true in certain contexts. But I think that the ultimate way to get forward is to actually try very hard, even though it's difficult, to find the places where people on the other side are acting in good faith. And the way to do that is to try to figure out ways of really, putting forward policies that, even though they're difficult and even though they're not going to be perfect, are going to move the ball forward, even if only in a small way, rather than just trying to accept the status quo. Because I think at a base level, the status quo as it exists is unacceptable for both Jews and for Muslims and for Israelis and Palestinians.
Yeah. I mean, you speak in nice platitudes, and I appreciate, and I don't want you to just
quite a platitude.
Well, it is in the sense that, again, your solution or your step in the right direction, you're moving the ball forward, I think was the phrase you used. It would just, make the situation intensely worse. That's not a good situation. But are we going to get on to apartheid and genocide?
We are. I've
got quotes. I did research, motherfucker.
I know. I just wanted to kind of put a pin in that. Look, we got 45 minutes. It's plenty of time to get to both of these topics.
Okay.
I promise
Fair
you.
enough.
Okay. Well, let's just get right into it then. Genocide.
Let's go.
Is that what is going on in Gaza right now? Is Israel engaging in active intentional genocide? I'm going to pass the
Yes.
ball to Kevin first.
Next question.
And well, do you even disagree with that, Quibbles?
That is a genocide? Yeah, I do.
Okay, can you elaborate? First, I guess, Kevin, can you explain why you think it is, and then we'll allow Quibbles to explain why he thinks it is not. Please.
Yeah, I mean, again, without getting into nitpicking definitions and all the rest of it, I think under any realistic definition of the components of genocide, what we are seeing in Gaza and what we have seen over the course of decades by successive Israeli governments has been, and indeed on the West Bank, is genocide. Okay, we have seen a consistent ethnic displacement. We have seen direct murders. We have seen any number of awful things. Whether you think they're in regard to rockets coming over or October the 7th or anything else, what we are seeing is the bit by bit forcible removal of one ethnic group from the place. We have seen also the beginnings of genocide, as well as the actual actions itself. We have seen the dehumanization of the Palestinian people, along with their murder and destruction of the area. We have seen, I mean, unspeakably genocidal quotes, not from random fucking people, not from even random members of political parties, but from leading government figures. And I've got a couple of quotes, if you'll allow me, indulge me for a second. Benjamin Netanyahu directly referred to Amalek in a tweet he sent out, in which he said, "You must remember what Amalek has done to you," says a holy Bible, and we do remember, which is a direct reference to the Bible, in which God asks Saul to punish the Amaleks for what they have done to Israel. Do not spare them, or all that belongs to them, do not spare them. Put them to death, the men, the women, the children, infants, cattle, sheep, camels, and donkeys. Pretty fucking genocidal. He's the head of government. The Israeli public diplomacy minister, Galit Distel Atbaryan, lovely name, erase all of Gaza from the face of the earth. The Gazan monsters will fly to the southern fence and try to enter Egyptian territory, or they will die. Gaza should be erased. Knesset member Hanok 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 said, "You will die, your children will die, your grandchildren will die. There won't be a Palestinian state. That will never be." 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜, Israel
Okay, I don't know
Minister
how
of
many of
Social
these.
Equality,
Kevin,
delightfully.
I don't know how many of these quotes
Just
we're speaking.
one
Let him
last.
finish. There's just two of you.
last
You
one.
guys can have
Okay.
both a good amount of
Alright.
chunk of time to introduce
Alright,
your
that's
points.
fine. Just like
𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙.
it's just quotes from random dudes, but okay. Go
Well,
for it.
no. Well, they're not random people, are they? Benjamin Netanyahu is not a random individual in all of this.
My point
𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙,
is
the Israeli Minister of Social Equality, ironically, said, "I am proud of the ruins of Gaza. I don't care about Gaza. I literally don't care. For all I care, they can go and just jump into the sea." We have seen consistent genocidal action and word, deed, and spoken from leaders of the Israeli government, from the IDF, and that goes along with the fact that they have been directly killing people, not just what's the phrase they use? Collateral damage. We have seen literally. There's the infamous guy with the white flag, who is then murdered by an Israeli sniper. We have seen recently the Flower Massacre, which is just an unspeakable crime, which Israel has tried to put down to being a crush, which is interesting given the bullet wounds in the victims. This is a deliberate campaign of ethnic cleansing, murder, and ultimately displacement, which continues on from the Nakba and on for the decades. This has been a long-term project. It has not been, thankfully, a conclusive project. So the idea that it has to be a complete genocide and that all of them have to be removed is clearly absurd. I think under any definition of genocide, this meets it. And if it doesn't, then genocide is a worthless phrase.
Okay. That said,
Okay.
I want to give Quibbles equal time here
Yep.
to explain why it's not a genocide.
Yeah, sure.
Please.
Okay, so there's a couple of things. The first I just want to start with, beyond the question of whether or not something is a genocide, there's a tactical thing that's going on here, I think, which is that it is obviously difficult to be seen as the person who is saying something is not a genocide, because it seems to imply that you are somehow in support of what's going on, or that you're somehow diminishing it. I want to be clear about why I care about the term genocide and making sure that it's being used properly. I think that the term genocide is sometimes used more flippantly than it ought to. And the result of that is that when we are trying to discuss things like ethnic cleansing, when we are trying to discuss things like genocide, when we're trying to discuss things that are war crimes and beyond that, just ethical breaches at the highest level, we need those terms to mean something. And there's a reason that, sexual assault is different than rape. There's a reason that all of these terms have different terms. And it doesn't mean that you're a rape apologist when you call something that's sexual assault rather than rape. With that said, I want to now unpack the question of whether or not something is genocide. So what I heard you list was ethnic displacement, bit by bit forcible removal of one ethnic group from the place, dehumanization of the Palestinian people, the murder and destruction of the area, and I'll broadly describe your quotes as stochastic terrorism. The stochastic terrorism, I'm fully in agreement with you. Absolutely, there have been members of the Knesset, certainly Bibi is one of them, who have been engaged in stochastic terrorism. Yes, that is absolutely true. The murder and destruction of the area. When we talk about murder, it definitionally, built into the term, means something about intent. And I think that it's unfair in the context of a war to say that the unintentional killings of civilians when you're going after terrorists can be counted as murder. It can certainly be called an unjustified killing. That's definitely true. But I'm not comfortable with the term murder. These are, again, and I see your face and I understand why you're giving it, but there is a difference between an unjustified killing and a murder. And it does matter when we're trying to describe that difference. And the dehumanization of the Palestinian people, absolutely. The ethnic displacement, I don't agree with that one. If we're talking about what happened during the Nakba, absolutely that was an ethnic displacement, yes. But if we're talking about what's happening currently, no, that's not an ethnic displacement. The most recent ethnic displacement in the context of the Israel-Palestine situation was the ethnic displacement of the Jews who were living in Gaza. I was in support of that ethnic displacement. That is, and the reason that I bring that up is because ethnic displacement is obviously horrible, but there are situations where ethnic displacement can be appropriate. That was one of them. It is very rare when it's appropriate. I don't think that it's appropriate to try to get the people out of Gaza permanently. Obviously, it's not appropriate. It's also not happening. That's not anything that anyone is genuinely trying to push for. If we're talking about the West Bank, I think that it is unfortunately likely that a large number of Jews ultimately are going to be ethnically displaced from the West Bank in order to see the West Bank become an independent country, because I don't see that being an independent country that is comfortable having Jews, even as a minority. Whereas there is obviously a large, sizable minority, a minority that has been in the Supreme Court. It's represented 20% of people within Israel proper of Palestinians. So I do see a difference there. But with that, we can open up.
Okay, yeah, lots been said.
It's a very interesting head of a pin you've decided to dance on there. The unlawful, or was it unjustified killing? Like, murder in war happens. The exact example I gave, because it was caught on camera, because cameras are fucking everywhere now, was the man with his hands up and with a white flag in his hand, who was literally killed by a sniper. There's no way you can justify that in any fucking legal setting whatsoever. It's clear and obvious that that person had given themselves up. They had a white flag on a stick in their hand. They were shot dead. That's not an unjustified killing. That's not some collateral damage bullshit. That's fucking murder. Now, that's one example, of course. The idea that you're going to try and, well, actually, bro, definition your way out of 30,000 civilian deaths is
Hold up. I'm sorry.
again,
Just
it's
before
that's
not
one
true.
hell of a
Hold
hill
up,
to die
hold up,
on.
hold up, hold up, stop. That's not true. It's not 30,000 civilians dead. It's 30,000 dead. That's a different statement.
Okay, I would hazard a guess that you are referring to the fact that Israel claims X number of people amongst those are terrorists or are combatants,
Do you
enemy
dispute that?
combatants.
Wait, hold on. Do you dispute that there are enemy combatants?
No,
that
there
have
are
been
probably
killed?
there are probably some a number of them, but the way that Israel has defined that as anyone from the ages of I forget the exact, it's something like 15 to 50. All men in that age range are considered to be enemy combatants, which is fucking despicable. Because of course, majority of those will not be.
That's not, no, Kevin, that's not true. It is everyone who is of that age cohort and is also within a specific region that they've had months to leave and have been told to leave.
Okay, but literally, we've seen when asked to leave, convoys of people having missiles fired at them by the IDF. We have seen the areas they have gone to being fired at. We now have the ultimate, which is them being pinned up against the border fence at Rafah, and the Israeli government literally slavering to go in there.
Stop. Let's take this piece by piece. You said that it's unreasonable to say that these people that they're defining as being combatants are, generally speaking, combatants. When you're talking about people in a location that they have had ample time to leave and have chosen not to leave, and that is a
because
location.
They live there.
Hold up.
Because
And that is
they
a
live
location.
there.
Hold up. And that is a location known to be harboring terrorists. And that is a location that they've had time to leave but have chosen not to. At this point, I don't think that it's unreasonable to call them to be engaged with Hamas. I think that's a reasonable thing to say.
No, they live in this fucking town. The IDF have no jurisdiction there. What are you talking about?
Kevin,
if they get killed,
it's
that death is on their fucking hands. I'm sorry. They don't have to fucking leave.
It's a war. You don't have to leave?
It's not really a war, is it? The Palestinian people have no real way of defending themselves.
Wait,
Hamas
it's not a
do,
war?
to a degree. But it's barely a war. It's barely a war, because for a start,
what do you mean it's barely a war?
Israel doesn't even fucking recognize Palestine as its own fucking independent
Kevin,
country.
I want to be crystal clear.
It's a war.
Hold up. If what you mean by it's barely a war is that Israel could nuke the entirety of Gaza and wipe it off the face of the earth tomorrow, then yeah, it's not a war. But unlike Hamas,
clearly not what I mean.
Hold up. But unlike Hamas, Israel does not, in its charter or constitution, have the desire to destroy every single innocent Gazan, right? And so therefore, unlike Hamas, who, if given the same opportunity, would clearly nuke all of Israel, Israel is not willing to do that to the Gazan people. So the only reason that any of this is happening, that any of the fighting is happening as it exists on the ground today, is because instead of being willing to do that, Israel would rather send its own sons and daughters into combat. Some of them will die, some of them have died, in order to be involved in this fighting, as opposed to doing the simpler option, which would simply be to nuke the entirety of Gaza off of the face of the earth.
Are you suggesting that we should be like super duper grateful to the Israeli government
That's
for
not what
being
I said.
absolute fucking psychopaths and nuking in a way that would obviously affect them as well from fallout? No, but I'm not going to give them. I'm not going to give them like the benefit of the doubt. They're just bombing the shit and have killed fucking 30,000 people. But thankfully they hadn't glassed the place, so we should be grateful.
I'm trying to take this piece by piece. You said one, that these people.
No, you're trying to minimize a fucking genocide.
No, I'm trying to take this piece by piece. You said one, that these people are not involved with Hamas if they're in a location that they have had months
they're not necessarily.
Stop.
They're not necessarily so.
Stop. Let me finish my point.
Don't put words in my fucking mouth.
I had literally 2 points. Let me finish my 2 points before you continue. Okay. One, you said that these people who are involved in locations, and I want to be clear, these are not towns as a whole, these are individual buildings where known to be harboring Hamas, that they have been told had ample time to leave, but have chosen not to over a period of not days, not weeks, but months, okay, that they have had time to leave, that these people you're claiming are not military combatants, and it is unreasonable to call them military combatants when you're counting the numbers of people who are dead. Number one, that is ridiculous. Number two, you called it not a war. That too is absurd. The fact that Israel could end the war by simply wiping their enemies, quote unquote, off of the map, which is to say Hamas off the map, but also in doing so, oh yeah, 2.2 million innocent Gazans, that they're not willing to do that doesn't mean that it's not a war. It is a war.
Well, hallelujah! They've only bombed 30,000. Awesome. I mean, what a weird hill to die on. Ironically, secondly, it's not just
Is that
individual
really your
buildings; it's
takeaway from
entire
what I
blocks
just
of
said?
city. Well, no, because I think your point is so risible that I don't feel like it's beneath refutation. It's silly. You're being
It's
fucking silly.
beneath refutation to say that it's a war.
No,
It's a very simple point.
I said it's barely a
Saying
war.
it's a
I said it's
war
barely a
doesn't
war.
mean that I'm demanding you
For
take a
instance,
side of the war. It's simply saying it's a war. That's all I'm saying.
no, but
It
you
is a
clearly
war.
have taken a. You've clearly taken a side in the war.
Of course, I've
That's the
taken a
point I'm
side.
making.
Kevin, I've taken a side in terms of the conflict. Yes, obviously. But when I say it's a war, that's not taking a side. That's a truth claim, right? There's a difference
Okay,
between a truth
and I
claim
said
and
it's barely a war
a
in as much
prescription.
as it's not really two nation states because, for instance, they don't have an air force, they don't have a navy, they barely have any armed forces. Apparently, they have amazing burrowing technology like fucking moles because everywhere has
They have
tunnels. Apparently,
billions of dollars.
every hospital in the fucking in Gaza apparently had a network of fucking rabbit warrens underneath it that Israel just had to bomb. Apparently. Regardless of the fact that it had fucking,
Okay,
newborn babies in it and stuff.
Hamas has an annual budget of $2 billion.
Right.
Like, spare me the bullshit where they're not able to be like. I understand that they're not on the same scale as Israel. That's certainly true, but they're not like these nothings. And by the way, okay, when we
No,
engage with
this is the
terrorists,
point. It's
when we
Hamas that have
hold up,
Hamas have a defense.
stop,
The
You want to
Gazan people
stop?
Hold
do
on.
You want to
not.
think it's my turn? It's my turn. Number one, they have $2 billion a year. Okay, they're not some nothing. Number two, when I say something is a war, you don't just engage in war against states. There are other things that we've gone to war against in the past. We've gone to war against the Taliban in the past. The Taliban was not a
Which was the
state.
government.
It was a non-state actor at the time. And yet, you can go to
No,
war
it was the
against a
government. No,
non-state actor.
it was the
No,
government of
Taliban. No, the
Afghanistan.
Taliban. No, the Taliban was into a much less intense degree in control over their territories than Hamas is in control over Gaza.
Okay,
That is not
I didn't say they were a strong government. I said they were the government. So that is
okay.
you
So
essentially
fine.
de
Then the
facto
Gaza.
invading and
Okay, so
removing
Kevin,
the government of the
fine. Then
place.
who is closer to being the government of Gaza prior to the 7th than Hamas?
No, Hamas are the government. Yeah, that's fine. But
Okay,
my
so
argument
then it's
isn't
a
that
war
Hamas
between
can't defend
governments. Then
themselves.
it is
My
a
argument is that fucking
Kevin, it is a
people,
war.
the Gazan people, can't defend themselves, and it's innocent people who are being fucking murdered
I
right now.
okay, I'm going to throw a
That's
flag
why
on the
we
play
have to
here.
get it from Hamas.
I'm going to throw a flag on the play here. Whether you want to call it a war, a conflict, a special military operation, I don't think it matters, and I don't care.
Denazify Gaza. Let's go.
Let's move on from that point.
Kevin.
I'm more curious about the point, right? And this is to Kevin, right? I understand that there is a huge power disparity between Hamas and Israel, but does that, at the end of the day, matter? If an armless man challenges you to a duel, and then just starts biting at you, are you supposed to put your arms behind your back and bite back, or can you sock one, right?
No. To use your slightly odd analogy, the point would be that you would either say, well, actually, that doesn't even fucking work because the Hamas obviously can hurt Israel, so they're not an armless.
Yeah,
group.
but they are someone who is
to take on the person.
much
To
weaker.
take on that person is fine, but to kill 30,000 of his fucking people who live on his street, or well, it's a big street, 30,000, but in his town or whatever, is not okay. That's the point I would go with. Gaza, Hamas are fucking scum, and I wish nothing but their eternal destruction. But what I will not put up with is the fucking deaths of tens of thousands of fucking people, so
Okay.
that Israel gets to fucking wave its dick around. And of course,
Okay.
Israel
It's not to
ultimately
wave
doesn't
their
actually
dick
give a fuck
around.
about the hostages either. They've literally shot some of them. They've fucking attacked in the press the families who have called for stronger action on this and actually want their family members back. The Israeli government and the IDF don't give two fucks about this. It's an excuse they are using to further their Zionist aims. That's what's happening.
They don't give a fuck about the 1,000+ innocent civilians who were murdered. They don't give a fuck about the
No, I said
people
the
who were...
hostages. No, I said the hostages. I said specifically the hostages. And actually, some of the
Israel, I'm
propagandists
sorry,
really
Israel
don't,
doesn't
because they
care about the
lied about a lot of
hostages.
this stuff. Like, they made up stories about 40 babies being beheaded or people being thrown into fucking ovens, which is disrespectful. No, stop telling me to fucking stop, just so you can have your silly, narrow definitions where you can actually,
Okay.
I'm going to
Kevin,
you, bro, into a new definition of what genocide is. It's
is
ridiculous.
your claim, I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. Your claim is that the Israeli government doesn't care that the Israeli people were kidnapped by terrorists.
No, ultimately they don't. No. I
They
mean,
don't care.
they've literally killed some of them that have been released that had white flags. We have seen them attacking the families of these people. This isn't like, they don't treat it with any amount of solemnity. There's no respect for these fucking people. They are a tool. They are a PR tool to get good PR, which Israel is in desperate need of course, because they keep doing this genocide, which gives them bad PR around the world, and so people feel sorry. That's a natural reaction that people have, because we, as compassionate people of the world, give a fuck about these people and want to see them return safely to their homes. Okay, the Israeli government couldn't really give two fucks. They've been bombing indiscriminately and have probably killed many.
They've not been bombing
that.
indiscriminately.
Okay, I
We've
want to give
already
the ball to
established.
Quibbles for a little bit. Okay, Quibbles,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay. Number one, obviously Israel is not bombing indiscriminately. We know that's not true because we've both already agreed that if Israel wanted to bomb indiscriminately, the war would be over tomorrow. They could wipe all of Gaza off of the face of the earth tomorrow. So obviously,
officially...
Stop. It's my turn. Shut up. I love you, but you have to be silent. Thank you. It is simply not true that this is indiscriminate, number one. Number two, okay, with that, it is also not true that Israel doesn't care about its own people being kidnapped. Obviously, they care. They care intensely, which is why this whole thing has happened. Prior to this, they did a trade negotiation where they gave 200 members of Hamas, plus over 200 members of Hamas, back to Hamas in exchange for one person who wasn't even a civilian, but was rather a member of the military, right? A member of the military,
yeah.
Yeah, someone who they care about significantly less than kids, right?
No, I don't think that is the case. I think the IDF care about the IDF more than they care about random civilians. Yeah.
Oh, good lord, Kevin. Honestly, do you honestly believe that? You honestly think that the Israeli government, which is democratic,
just take him at his word at this point. He said it a few times. Please carry on.
I'll take him at his word. It's insane, and it's insane to think that the hundreds of people who have been kidnapped matter less than the one person who was kidnapped, who they responded with this massive tectonic shift. Arguably, the fact that they did that release program is part of the reason that October 7th was possible in the first place, and yet they did it because they cared that intensely about one hostage.
One military hostage. Yeah. They don't seem as bothered about getting the civilians back alive, particularly.
They're a democratic country.
Well, within reason, yes. Yeah, there are some issues, but they're a democratic country.
No, not really. They are simply a democratic country. If you're talking about Israel proper, they are simply a democratic country. There's not really that much nuance. They're actually
Okay.
arguably they're more
Um,
democratic than we are because they don't have an electoral college.
well, yeah. Again,
Well, I don't want to
America
get
is.
into an electoral college
Anyway,
today.
yeah,
That's
that's
beyond the scope. Carry on.
yeah.
Yeah, but I only said it because I'm sure all three of us agree about the electoral college. But continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've forgotten the point I was going to make now before you said stop. My mind has gone blank. To be fair, it is nearly 1 a.m.
It is.
When did I try and interrupt?
Oh,
Try
oh
and jog
God!
my
Like there's
memory.
been so
So
many.
many times. Ken. You interrupt
Hold
all
on.
of-
Both of you have been
Yeah.
interrupting all night. Which is, I mean, it's fine. It's a robust discussion. I think a good, healthy back and forth is great.
Right.
I think maybe if you're
Indiscriminate. Sorry,
indiscriminate bombing.
nuclear.
Go ahead, please.
Right. Okay. So, firstly, it would be good if the Israeli government, as both you and I accept, have nuclear weapons, if they'd accept that and allow IEA investigators in to check that that's okay, in the same way that every other nuclear power outside of North Korea do. That would be fucking cool. Regardless of that. Secondly, they don't use nuclear weaponry because that would be absolutely indefensible and would lose them basically all international support. Whereas they have plausible deniability of using conventional munitions, be it via aeroplane or regular artillery or whatever, to shell as they see fit.
Okay,
anyone who looks at the towns of rubble, we've all seen. There's plenty of drone footage. It's one of the amazing technological breakthroughs in war that we can bring into you now. The destruction of entire fucking cities via the drone. We've all seen that footage. You can't argue that's some sort of precision bombing campaign. That is the deliberate destruction. We've literally seen them using controlled demolition on the Parliament building, on the University of Gaza building. These are things that Israel has purposefully destroyed.
Okay. With that said, I want to give Quibbles a chance to refute.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so to the first point of they couldn't literally use a nuke, I was using nuke sort of proverbially. You're right, they wouldn't literally use a nuke. If they wanted to do what I'm describing, they would carpet bomb the entirety of it. Carpet bombing would get the same effect, but it would not have the same international implications. They would not be a pariah state in the same way. They could probably get away with it. Okay, so the broader point is they aren't willing to do that. And the fact that they're not willing to do that is a fundamental difference.
Hold
right?
on.
Because
Hold on. Quibbles. Maybe this is my fault. So Kevin has made an assertion that the way that they are conducting the bombing currently, and he's given some examples with the drone footage where you see massive amounts of destruction. How is that not indiscriminate?
If it were indiscriminate, then the number wouldn't be 30,000. The number would be 2.2 million. Because we've both established that if they wanted to take out the entire country, even if it weren't through nukes literally, but would rather through carpet bombs, they could take out the entire country. So the fact that they're not doing that implies that they're not doing it indiscriminately, which means they're doing it discriminately. And so that begs the question, okay, there are two possible goals of theirs that get you to 30,000 dead. One goal is that they've decided that these very specific civilians deserve to die. That's one possibility. The much more likely possibility is these specific people need to die because these specific people are terrorists, right? And so if that is their goal, which it very much seems to be the case, that's why they're focusing overwhelmingly in the north. That's why they're overwhelmingly focusing on trying to take out individual buildings rather than entire areas. You are citing specific areas, which it is true that there have been very few, but some larger places, like blocks even, of areas that have been destroyed. That is true, but there are also blocks that are being controlled by Hamas, that those places are being used as headquarters by Hamas. And so when you're talking about that, this is quite clearly a discriminate bombing. And so the question is, what is it that you think is the basis for their discrimination in bombing campaigns? Is it because they have specific civilians that they want to kill? And if so, which civilians and why?
I don't think they specifically give two fucks about which individuals they kill, or even indeed if they kill any. If they could just get the Palestinians to just leave, go into the Sinai or whatever, they'd be happy with that because they're doing an ethnic cleansing. And I think we can see that because they've done stage by stage by stage a campaign of destruction, purposeful destruction of civilian infrastructure, not just Hamas infrastructure, not just buildings with tunnels, because again, there have been buildings that they have controlled demolitioned, self-admittedly controlled demolition, that they have not made any claims were occupied by Hamas or they had any tunnels underneath or around them at all, right? They have purposefully made impossible, which, by the way, is one of the definitions for genocide under the UN Convention. They've made the possibility of the continued life of people of northern Gaza impossible. Certainly in the short to medium term, because there's nowhere to go back to in a large number of places. The destruction has been, like you say, actually, you know what? It has been discriminate. It's been discriminate in that they have specifically destroyed buildings and areas of towns that they wanted to destroy, partly because of Hamas, I'm sure, but partly because they don't want people to be able to return to that place.
Okay, why don't they
suggesting.
want people to be able to move to those specific places? And if that were the case, why wouldn't they be focusing specifically on places next to the border? Because if they were going on places next to the border, it would be the places that are much more easy to fold into Israel proper if that were their goal.
I think the long-term... Well, actually, I don't think Benjamin Netanyahu has a long-term strategy, because he doesn't see himself, quite rightly, as the long-term leader of Israel. He's just surviving day to day, week to week. But I think longer-term plan for the 𝕵𝖎𝖎, if you will, is that they want to make life in that place impossible, so that they can then essentially say this is unoccupied land now and allow settlements to begin there.
Right. So that's okay. So I'm going to repeat the question. The question was, if that were the goal, to try to get specific locations to be depopulated in order to be repopulated with Jews from Israel proper, wouldn't they be focusing on locations that are directly on the border rather than places that are further inland?
Maybe, I guess. I mean, I don't know exactly in terms of the strategy here.
Surely,
like, I don't know exactly what their plan is. I can't tell you the exact action plan there.
Okay, but surely you've seen like the maps of where these bombs are going, and you've seen that these maps are, number one, overwhelmingly going to the north, not to the south, and number two, overwhelmingly going to the internal areas, the areas where the cities are, and the areas where there is a massive hubs of Hamas and large numbers of tunnels and large numbers of fighters,
True, but
rather
given
than places that are on the border.
Right, but given the nature of the fact that basically everywhere they've bombed, they've claimed there's some sort of Hamas presence, which would be, I mean, borderline impossible given the number of places.
Is it?
And the supposed number of people that
Stop.
the estimated number.
Kevin, piece by
So
piece.
there's an estimated, at least at the beginning of the war, there's an estimated 20 to 40,000 Hamas operatives within Gaza, right? Gaza is a dense place.
In a population of 2 million people.
Sure, but given the density and the areas required, like 40,000 throughout the city could, again, offer, location-wise, it is feasible that there would be a lot of buildings that they would...
Also,
but that's all speculation. That's speculation.
Well, there have been reports of them literally paving over and blockading a specific road from north to south, which seems to me to suggest relatively imminent occupation of northern Gaza. I could be wrong. There could be some entirely innocent reason that they would.
Kevin, you argued. I don't understand where you're like. I don't understand what your goal is here. Like, you argued earlier that, okay, you wanted
stop murder, to stop the killing of fucking people.
Let me finish the sentence. You argued earlier in this very conversation that you wanted an occupation. Okay, you wanted it to be
not by Israel, for fuck's sake.
You wanted it to be from the United Nations, not through Israel. But in order to do that, you're saying that laying the groundworks for that to be possible is somehow illegitimate for them to do?
Hang on, how does them flattening entire areas of cities aid
That's
any
not
kind
what
of
that's not what you said.
occupation?
Stop. That's not what you said. What you said is something very specific. You said that they flattened individual roads in order to make those roads better accessible to tanks, so that those roads would be better able
They
to
have
be
blockaded
in
a
order
specific
to
road from
gain
north to
a
south.
military. Can I please finish? In order to gain. Can I please finish? In order to gain a military control. If your goal for the Gaza Strip is for the United Nations to have that military control, your only two options are either A, for that control to be wrested from the Hamas terrorists by Israel or by the United Nations itself. Obviously, you don't want the United Nations itself to do it, and therefore you want Israel to do it. Yes?
No, I don't want Israel to do any of this. What the fuck?
You
No.
just
Hold
said
on, hold on.
Israel
You gotta
needs
let
to
him answer your
fucking
question.
leave an hour ago that you wanted the United Nations to do it.
Quibbles. You
No,
asked him a question.
look,
You have to let Kevin answer the question, please.
Israel needs to fucking leave, okay? Israel needs to leave the land that should be Palestine. That's my overall fucking point here. The idea that you could have any kind of sensible, it's not a
completely
solution, it's nothing, it's gibberish, it's pie in the sky. You might as well just say, I want Israel to be made out of chocolate. It's fucking nonsense. Israel occupying Gaza and setting up some sort of election in a place that has no fucking buildings to even have a polling booth or
Can you
something, like
stop
it's
lying?
stupid.
That's
It's
a
fucking
lie.
stupid.
You know it's a lie.
I'm not
There's no
suggesting
part.
every town has that, but also, where are the fucking
Okay,
people that were in that town? There are no
Kevin,
people in the
that's a
town.
lie. Kevin, that was a lie. When you just said that it's impossible to run an election in terms of the physical infrastructure of what is in
In parts
Gaza
of northern
today,
Gaza,
that is a
it would
lie.
be impossible. It would be
It is
impossible.
no, it would not
You've
be
seen the drone
impossible.
footage. You couldn't hold a place there. No one fucking lives there
Evan,
anymore because there's nowhere
Evan,
to live.
Evan, this is a lie. I don't understand.
Okay. No,
Like
actually,
there is
northern
no
Gaza's
part.
fine. Actually,
There's
they could
no
just
part.
they could just
There's
have a
no.
nice super
There's
duper election. I'm sure.
there's no part of the Gaza Strip that is more than like it is a very dense location. There's no part that's more than like a mile and a half from places where you could have an election held. It's not true. The
Okay.
idea that you couldn't run an election isn't true. So don't say it.
You couldn't
It's
hold a
frustrating
fair
when I'm
election.
trying to
You
have a
couldn't hold
conversation.
anything like a fair election in a place where people fucking can't realistically live. There's no civil infrastructure.
Kevin,
There's there
again,
are no
I
fucking people
Kevin,
living there.
Kevin, again, this is a general thing, okay? If I'm making a point about an individual point that you make, and then your response is not to respond to my point about that point that you made, but rather to go off about, oh, but this broader blah, blah, blah. Like, no. That individual thing that you said was ridiculous. It was wrong. Don't say
No, it
things that are
isn't
ridiculously
fucking wrong, okay? There are places in northern Gaza where holding anything
Is there
like a fair or indeed free election, given that you would have Israeli soldiers with fucking guns on the streets, I think that would certainly curtail civic engagement, shall we say. The idea that you would have anything like a free and fair election is absurd.
Okay. Gang. Do you guys want to get to the apartheid one, or you want to keep going on this one?
Apartheid,
limited.
motherfuckers.
We do have a
before
limited
we
window
do
here.
okay, before we do, I just want
Concisely,
to
please. Concisely.
yeah, okay. The width of Gaza at its largest width, okay, is 6 miles wide. Okay? The furthest distance in the United States from a polling place, okay, is 17 miles in the United States. Okay? Okay. The idea that 6 miles, that there's any part of all of Gaza that's further than 6 miles, let alone 17 miles, from a place that you could do polling, is wrong. It's not true. Don't say
Okay.
things that are obviously not true.
Okay. I'm throwing a flag.
Okay, but
I'm
no
hold
one
on.
lived in these
We're
fucking
never going to get to
areas.
apartheid. We're never going to get to apartheid if we keep going back and forth. So I'm going to have to at least at one point.
You want to get to apartheid? Okay.
Yeah, I do. I because again, I have limited time. And I want to make sure we cover the major points that I wanted to cover tonight. And apartheid is absolutely one of them. This has been an accusation leveled at Israel for a while by various bodies and humanitarian organizations, etc. Israel, of course, denies the claim. Where do you stand? And we started with Quibbles last time, so I want to start with Kevin this time. Kevin, is Israel an apartheid state, and why, please?
Unequivocally, 100%, yes, it is an apartheid state. What do I mean by that? Apartheid, obviously originally a South African term meaning aparthood. In other words, the separation of people based on either, you can do it with race, religion, whatever. Robust form of apartheid, but you have the legal form of apartheid, which runs throughout the Israeli recent legal code, shall we say. You have the 2018 nation-state law, which I mentioned earlier, which says that the right to exercise national self-determination in Israel is unique to the Jewish people. It also relegates Arabic to a what's called special status, with Hebrew being the official language, which is, again, you know, in of itself wouldn't be necessarily the end of the world, but when you put it all together, it's there's clearly at least two-tier strata system within Israel. The 2022 citizenship law was a specifically disgusting piece of legislation which banned the naturalization of Palestinian Arabs from becoming Israeli citizens, even if they'd married a pre-existing citizen of the State of Israel, which forced thousands to either flee the country or to live apart in terms of interracial marriage. Basically, practically speaking, making interracial marriage pretty much inconceivable in new marriages. Arabs within Israel are clearly treated and seen as second-class citizens. The way in which the Arab members of the Knesset are treated by other members of the Knesset, including the quote I gave earlier, where he said, "You will die, your children will die, your grandchildren will die," that was shouted by 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 at an Arab member of the Knesset, and that was fine. No sanction was ever taken against the man. Clearly and obviously, we have a two-tier citizenship status for Arabs and Jews inside Israel. And I think, given Israel's very, very strong connection, even during the times of the boycott of South Africa, apartheid South Africa, they were very closely linked because they were essentially running a similar system and saw each other as the last bastion outposts of acceptable apartheid in the world. And ultimately, if there's one person we can look to as a man who understands, not just in some theoretical sense, but in a very lived sense, what apartheid means, it would be Nelson Mandela, who said, "If I was to refer to any of the parties as a terrorist state, one might refer to the Israeli government, because they are the people who are slaughtering defenseless and innocent Arabs in the occupied territories, and we don't regard that as acceptable." If Nelson Mandela, as close to a deity as any living person in recent times, as is on the side of the Palestinians against the apartheid state of Israel, I know where I stand.
Okay, first of all, Brittany Simon, thank you for the raid. Heavy topic today. We're discussing Israel and Palestine. I know it's been done, but there's been new since we've talked about it last, there's been other incidents and things that have happened. Thank you for the raid. I hope your stream went well. We are now on. We're getting to the end of the debate, and we're talking about is Israel an apartheid state? And we just heard the opening statement from KevinLogan, and now we're going to hear the refutation by QuibblesoverCoffee. Okay, Quibbles.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Is Israel an apartheid state? Go ahead.
Okay. So I want to break this down into two separate categories. There's a question of the West Bank, and then there's the question of Israel proper. The West Bank, I think, is an occupation. I think if you're an occupation, it's different than being an apartheid situation. I want to be clear that I don't like occupations. I think that occupation currently in the case of the West Bank is the least bad option. But again, as we've discussed prior, I want to figure out a way of getting towards an Area B style rather than Area C style, and I want ultimately to get to an Area A style, hopefully eventually. With that said, the two things that you listed, other than, again, some quotes, which I don't know are particularly relevant, Hebrew is the official language, and the citizenship laws. Hebrew is the official language. I just sort of reject out of hand, right? Like lots of countries have official languages. Having an official language doesn't mean that you're an apartheid system. It just means that you have an official language. The citizenship law component, yes, interracial or rather interreligious marriage is very difficult in Israel. This has been a long-term time criticism of progressive Jews, myself included. This has been something that we've been concerned of long before October 7th. the marriage system within Israel is controlled through the religious authorities, which is to say that it is controlled not just by Jewish religious authorities, but also by Muslim and Baha'i and Sikh and Druze authorities as well. Now, I believe there's a couple of others, but those are the ones that I'm aware of. In that context, because they're through these religious authorities, those religious authorities only accept religious marriages that are within their religious group. And so therefore interreligious marriages are impossible. That said, it is possible to have those marriages accepted if they have been done outside of Israel. And so a lot of people, this has been historically what many gay people have done as well, who want to get married within Israel, will go to one of the surrounding countries, whether that be across Europe or whether that be in Egypt, wherever it might be, in order to get married with the person they want to. And once they are married to that person, those marriages are accepted inside of Israel proper. Now, I want to be clear. I oppose those laws. I think those laws are bad. But just because the law is bad doesn't make the law apartheid.
And with that, we'll open it up. Go ahead.
Okay, but I mean, clearly, you're ignoring the fact that there's clearly like a two-tier system of citizenship here, right? This was not done for some, like, I don't know, silly reason. This is clearly in part with the Jewish supremacist state of Israel. Again, it's the sole control of the Jewish people in that specific law. So to the point where a Jewish person from New York or London or Moscow can go and get citizenship in Israel, but an Arab who marries a Jewish person in Israel doesn't get citizenship. That's clearly a two-tier system where some people have rights based on ethnicity or religion, and some people do not.
Okay, so your proposal,
yeah. Like, I know you don't support that law, but just saying I don't support the law doesn't change the fact that there is a two-tier system of citizenship.
I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that having a immigration system that is encouraging some people to come into the country over other people in the country is apartheid?
No, I'm saying doing that solely on the basis of religion or ethnicity is apartheid, or part of apartheid. Yes. Yeah.
Wait,
like
part of apartheid.
I've no problem with Israel encouraging skilled workers to go to Israel and encourage their society. I'm very pro-immigration. They are specifically saying to all Jewish people, regardless of where they're from or what skills they have or anything like that, to go, that they are allowed to go and have citizenship in Israel in a way that Arabs, even if they marry or a Muslim, I should say, because it's religious, who marries an Israeli citizen, cannot. That is a racist two-tier citizenship system that you have there.
They're a refugee state of return. Is your proposal that because they were willing to save the Ethiopian Jews, that therefore they have an obligation to allow all refugees in?
No, I'm not arguing they should be. Oh, Jesus Christ! Right.
Like, are you?
They are allowed.
A country is allowed.
Hold on.
A country is allowed to have any immigration system it likes. But if it's done on specifically religious grounds,
before you answer my question, I want to lay it out fully.
Go on.
In the context of the Ethiopian Jews, right? They let in upwards of 200,000 Ethiopian Jews that were probably going to die if they hadn't done so. Okay, Ethiopia was a basket case at the time. There were lots of other people who were not Jewish who also, right, were in desperate need of figuring out some sort of situation so they wouldn't be in the situation they're in currently in Ethiopia. If you're willing to take on some number of refugees, does it have to be 1 or 0? Do you have to accept every single refugee worldwide or no refugees in order for it not to be an apartheid system, or can you be selective about which?
It's not about refugees, is it? Let's say a Jewish person from my own hometown of Birmingham in England, right? Let's say a Jewish person who is not a refugee, they would live perfectly soundly and upwardly mobile individual in Britain, can seek citizenship and be given citizenship in Israel just by dint of being Jewish, right? That's a thing that Israel allows.
The basis of their policy is that they were born as a country out of a ethnic cleansing of basically every single Middle Eastern country other than Israel. They were born out of the Holocaust, and they were born into this moment
I was about to say
where
they were born out of the
Jews,
Holocaust, certainly, yeah.
and they were born out of this moment where Jews were under threat worldwide. As a result of the fact that they were born out of this moment where Jews were under threat worldwide, they built a policy that said, we are going to be a place that will, at a generalized level, no questions asked, protect Jews. Is
Okay.
that
I mean,
apartheid?
there's a number of problems you have with that. Firstly, Zionism as a concept long predates the Holocaust, and indeed long predates any number of other.
Stop. This law.
No,
doesn't
not fucking stop. No fucking
This,
stop.
we're
Right? I'm going to
talking
say my
about
piece.
law. We're not talking about Zionism as a general concept. The law that we're talking about, right, is not a law that predates the Holocaust.
How was that established? Can I just ask, how was that law established in Israel?
That law was established as one of the very first laws that they created as a government.
Yeah, but how was that government established? Is what I'm asking.
By
Is that
the
done in some
virtue
peaceable?
of there was first the British authority gave them the rights, and then after that, those rights were questioned by every surrounding country, and then there was a war.
Okay, so they did it essentially
by
by conquest, because Britain doesn't get to act as the fucking the arbiter here. It's not a real estate agent that gets to give the land of a third people to a land of a second people.
Agree.
That's not how it works.
I agree. An imperialist. I agree. An imperialist power was in control over all of what ought to be the land of the Palestinians, including modern-day Jordan, and all of the land that ought to be the land of the Jews, including all of modern-day Israel. That is true.
Again, that's very odd. The land of the Jews is a very odd. Like, I don't know why it has to be some weird.
It's weird to say the land of the Palestinians too, but unfortunately, it has become very
clear. No, because Palestinian is based.
Hold on, one at a time.
Palestinian is, it can be anything. You can be a Palestinian of any religion. You could be a Palestinian of any kind of ethnic background. Jew is a rather disparate thing, given the number of different religious strains, and indeed you don't even have to be religious. You could be just ethnically Jewish and not be religious at all. The land of the Jews is a very strange concept. There are lots of people who are Jewish who do not consider themselves to be in alignment with Israel, and indeed most Zionists are not Jewish. They're evangelical Christians.
Alignment with Israel. Okay. When I say something is the land of the Jews, that is not a statement of, like, a place can be the land of the the Turks, or a land of whatever it might be, right? That doesn't mean that therefore every single Turk has an obligation to support the government therein.
Yeah, I
when
know
I say
that.
The land of the Jews, that's
right,
not.
But not all Turkic peoples get to go and live in Turkey.
Stop. When I say a place is a land of the Jews, that's not a governmental claim. That's a historic claim. It is simply true that the birthplace of Judaism is modern-day Judea, Samaria, and Israel. That is simply true.
Okay, well, the birth of Christianity is also true. So do the Christians get to claim it?
However, Christianity is not an ethnicity.
Yeah.
Christianity is not an ethnicity. Absolutely. I will say, Wick was sort of joking there, but I will say absolutely that yes, Christians do have a right and do have have a right to have access to the Holy Sepulchre. They have a right to have access to the Old City of Jerusalem.
No, the right to access.
Yes.
There's a difference between having right of access and calling it the land of the Christians.
It is the
thing I have a problem with.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Jews are an ethnicity that was born there. Christianity is not an ethnicity in the same way, right? There are Samaritan Jews, there are Semitic Jews, there are there are Samaritan Christians rather, and there are Semitic Christians as well. But unlike Judaism, Christianity is not an ethnicity, right? And so it is different.
Okay, Muslims, so you're arguing in favor. You're arguing in favor
but
of an ethno-state. Then.
No,
you're literally arguing in favor of an ethno-state.
No, I'm not. I'm arguing that people of a location have a right to go to the location when they are otherwise going to be killed?
They're not from that location. A Jewish
They
person
are.
from Warsaw or London is not from Tel
Kevin,
Aviv
what is that?
or
Okay,
Jerusalem.
okay.
That's the point I'm
Help
making
me.
here.
Okay, walk me through
And
this.
if you're arguing that they should be
Kevin,
allowed in just on the basis of them being Jewish, you're literally
Kevin,
arguing for a fucking
Kevin,
ethno-state.
Kevin, walk me through this, okay? Here's a person. They just survived the Holocaust, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just survived the Holocaust. The Holocaust is over now. However, literally everything that they've ever owned was stolen from them during the Holocaust. They are now penniless, they are jobless, and they have, PTSD, obviously, and they also have lots of physical ailments as a result of the Holocaust. Okay. They grew up in Poland.
Yeah.
Is this a Polish person?
Well, they're a Polish citizen, certainly. I mean, unfortunately, one of the problems with the disgusting anti-Semitism of the 1920s and 30s was the idea of Jewish people being some outside thing,
Right, so
unfortunately.
are they Polish?
Yes. They're a Polish citizen, that's the point I'm making, yes.
Do the Polish people
And they keep dual citizenship, by the way, as well. So that's,
Do the
they
Polish
are
people
literally both
consider-
Polish and Israeli, yeah.
Do the Polish people consider them to be Polish?
Probably not, but I don't really give a fuck about racists, in all honesty.
Okay, but
Like,
these are
I don't
people.
take the, I
Okay,
don't, you
but
know,
Kevin, obviously they're
Yeah.
not welcome in Poland, right?
This
Yeah,
is
I
in the
can understand
context
them
of
wanting to
just
leave.
immediately after World War II.
Jewish,
Yeah, we're
exactly,
talking right
yeah.
after World War II.
I can absolutely see why people would want to coalesce and to find a safe place. But I
Okay,
don't know why the crimes of European Christians have to be paid for with the blood and land of Palestinian people who didn't,
so
like, Palestinians didn't operate Auschwitz.
Kevin, I'm taking this piece by piece. Okay, again, I
Hmm.
don't like you keep on making these like massive ballooning stick. I just want to keep piece by piece, just tick by tick by tick. Okay, so we agree that that it is reasonable for them to have to understand that it is difficult for them to be conceptualized as being Polish, right?
Yeah, I
But they are
guess so.
primarily being conceptualized as being Jewish, not being conceptualized as being Polish. Okay,
Yeah.
so as someone who is primarily conceptualized as Jewish rather than Polish, okay, you're not welcome in Poland. What is Jewland?
Well, I mean, there wasn't a Jew land, was there? Again,
There actually was. There was a place called
it.
Judea, actually.
Well, that's. I mean, again, how far back do you want to go? Like,
The place that
technically,
was called Judea.
does every human being get to go back to Kenya and say, well, humanity started in the Great Rift Valley? Like, how fucking
think
far
that
back do you go before you just end up in fucking madness where everyone can claim any bit of land? Because we all came from somewhere at some fucking point. It's ridiculous. Now, I'm not suggesting that Jewish people shouldn't be able to live in those lands. And, by the way, the argument that they have some sort of historic right and therefore this specific piece of land is the only piece of land that Zionism could take is ridiculous. Because, of course, there were plans for other territories, including parts of Canada. There was suggestion that maybe a part of the American desert in the fucking west could be there. There was a Uganda plan, I think, at one point. It's a very modern addition to Zionism that this specific place is the only place that Jewish people can be safe.
That's not true. It's not modern that Jews have always been praying to the Kotel. It's not new that Jews have always considered Jerusalem to be the holiest city in our religion. It's not new that we have always. It simply is the home of. It's not new.
No. I'm not suggesting that Jewish people have some sort of connection to that territory. I'm suggesting the concept that the only place where Jewish people can be safe, the only place we could build any kind of homeland for the Jewish people, has to be this one tiny little strip. Right, this tiny little bit. That was added to a more generic Zionism, which has existed for hundreds of years.
When I say somewhere is the home of the Jews, that doesn't mean that the home of the Jews is the only place that a Jew could live. Obviously, that's not true. I currently live in Pittsburgh. That is a different statement than the question of what is the home of the Jews? To which the answer is the place where Judaism happened. The answer is the place where all of these people
But
came
again,
from.
it's the place where Christianity happened. It's the place where
No, but no, Kevin,
it's the
that's
place where,
not
where
parallel.
Muhammad took his night flight to fucking Jerusalem,
Kevin,
right?
that's not
All three,
parallel.
all
Christianity
three,
isn't an
all.
ethnicity. It's not parallel.
No, you are
Like,
arguing
literally,
for
if you
the
go
allowance
stop,
of
literally,
ethnically
Hold
if
on.
you
based
go back,
immigration into a place. You are arguing directly for an
if you
ethno
go
state.
back
That
enough
is what you are
generations,
doing.
if you go back enough generations, the overwhelming majority of Jewish people, modern Jewish people, whether they're from Ethiopia purportedly, whether they're from Egypt purportedly, whether they're from Poland purportedly, if you go back far enough, it is very obvious the overwhelming majority of us do in fact have lineage that extends back to Israel. Okay,
Yeah.
that is not true
Okay.
of Christians. That is not true of Muslims. It is true of Jews. Just
Okay. No.
Jews,
Well, no.
right?
Actually, no.
And
Not
Palestinians.
just Jews. There are plenty of Muslim people who've lived there for a
Yes,
very long
as
time
an
as well.
ethnic group, it is true of Palestinians. It is true of
Yes.
the people who were permitted to stay there after the Jews were ethnically cleansed, and it is true of the Jews who were ethnically cleansed.
Yes. No,
Okay,
absolutely, and I've got no problem with
so
that. But
okay,
but just on the basis of this argument that you have that the Jewish people are an ethnicity, which is undoubtedly correct. You, if you're arguing that certain ethnicities, i.e., in this case the Jews, are allowed specific rights that other groups based on ethnicity or religion alone are not, you are arguing explicitly for
that's not what I
apartheid,
said.
you are arguing explicitly for an ethno state, which makes you little better in reality, in practical reality, than a fucking neo-Nazi or a Hindu nationalist beating up fucking Muslims in northern India. It's the same basic shit. It's the
Okay.
same nasty supremacist garbage.
I'm going to have to let the Quibbles respond to that uninterrupted.
Yeah.
You made some accusations. Go
By
ahead.
all means.
Okay. Again, I want to take this piece by piece because again, you keep on just exploding into 50,000 different points simultaneously. Which is called a Gish Gallop. Okay, that's what Destiny taught me. It's called a Gish Gallop.
Oh,
okay.
wow, you've got Destiny brain rot.
Okay, hold
Excellent.
on.
Destiny brain.
Quibbles.
You interrupted me. How dare you?
Quibbles, get to your
Okay.
point.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. When I'm bringing up this ethnic component, the reason that I'm bringing it up is I'm explaining the basis for why Israel was founded in the first place and why it built the rules that it did. It was built literally by Holocaust survivors. It was built literally by people who were ethnically cleansed, not just from Poland and Germany, but from across the Middle East as well. In the aftermath of that, there is a particular understanding that those Jews had of what it means to be Jewish and under threat. And part of protecting Jews, they correctly assessed, is unfortunately recognizing the fact that there are others who do want to destroy Jewish people, whether that's in Poland or in Germany, etc. And therefore, they made this law that said, hey, listen, if you're a Jew and you're under threat, we will protect you. And that is a blanket rule across the board, no questions asked. And that's true in Ethiopia, across the board. I'm not done. Shut up. I love you. Be silent. Therefore, if that's the rule that you're coming to, you have to ask the question of whether or not you can make a statement that people who live in Israel are committed to the people who live in Israel being treated equally, and whether or not that statement is contradictory to the statement that Jews specifically must be protected by Israel, and that Jews specifically must be permitted as refugees into Israel. Does letting a Guatemalan into America mean that we're a Guatemalan supremacist country?
No, but you're not excluding everyone but or not excluding. Okay, you're not specifically saying to all Guatemalans you can come in. For instance, do you, as a Jewish person in Pittsburgh, as a Jewish person in Pittsburgh, do you feel like there's going to be a pogrom anytime soon against you?
I don't think there's going to be a pogrom against us. However, there was a mass shooting against us, and also
There was
the
indeed.
number the number of anti-Semitic attacks since the 7th have skyrocketed by 337%.
Okay, but do you feel that you are in need of refuge?
I personally am committed to the United States of America. I have spoken to a lot of other Jews who are reasonably terrified, and I think that there is reason for them to take comfort in the fact that there is a place that they will be protected.
Will they be protected? This is ultimately the point. I mean, after October
There is
7th,
there is a government who is committed to them being protected. Yes.
well, again, are they committed to being protected? Because again, when we've seen people being released, the Israeli government have shot those people. This has happened. The Israeli government has shown itself singularly incapable of protecting its people.
Okay.
I don't think you can realistically say
Okay.
that you, as a Jewish
There are
person in Pittsburgh,
200,000
are under more danger in Pittsburgh than you would be in Kiryat Shimon or wherever, one of these border towns. Also, just on the point of oh fuck, my mind's gone blank.
Well,
again, I
let
do
him
apologize.
try to remember
Yeah.
that. Let him deal with it. We are coming up at the end of this, so this is gonna be like the last back and
Yeah.
forth, and we're gonna get to closing statements. But go
So,
ahead.
okay, there are right now today 164,000 Ethiopian Jews living in Israel. By comparison, there are basically zero living in Ethiopia itself. I think it is safe to say that those 164,000 Jews living in Israel would be dead had Israel not saved their lives. Is that fair?
A fair chunk of them, yes, yeah.
The overwhelming majority of them.
Yeah, lots and lots of people would be dead otherwise,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Do you think it's fair to say that of the Egyptians?
What do you mean, sorry?
The Egyptian Jews.
Oh, Egyptian Jews. Yeah, look, don't get me wrong. There are lots of countries around the world in which Jewish people are
So
genuinely under threat.
Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Germany, right? You can throw in Poland there. You can probably throw in much of Russia. You can throw in Ukraine. You can throw in a lot of these places, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. No, I'm not saying that Jewish people aren't facing threats, but lots of
Okay,
people
so
are facing threats. And if you're
okay,
doing it just on
yes,
the basis of keeping an ethno-state, and just, for instance, we've seen literally the case of being described as preserving the Jewish character of Israel. So they're literally doing it for specifically ethno-nationalist reasons, not just to protect Jewish people, but specifically for the propagation of an ethno-nationalist endeavor.
Okay. I agree that the refugee crisis of Syria on the border of Israel, horrible, right? Surely you'd also agree that the refugee crisis of Syria, which is something that Germany did something about, but not that much about, lots of other places did something about, but not that much about, was an example of a refugee crisis. Sorry?
I was just going to say Britain did something about it by making it significantly worse.
Significantly worse. That's definitely true. Yeah, I blame you personally for that, by the way. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I do think that yeah, refugee crises are horrible, but I don't think that every single government is responsible for every single person worldwide. I think that instead, that governments get to pick and choose who they want to bring into their country at a base level. That's sort of the concept of what a state is. And if you believe in that as a principle, then part of that is that if they're allowed to choose what they're going to who they're going to bring in, they're allowed to choose who they're going to bring in, right?
Well, yeah, but again, it's the point of it being ethnically based. I opposed Donald Trump's Muslim ban shite in the United States for the same basic reason, and I would oppose it if it happened here as well. I don't think we should. I don't think we should be checking. I don't think we should be checking the religion or ethnicity of the person at it should be done on the basis of need and our ability to take people in. That's the point. And in Israel, it
And
isn't.
their
There's a
ability
blank
to integrate into our
all
country.
Jewish people,
Confidence that
regardless of whether they're under any
Wait,
threat.
hold up.
Look, if you're a very well-to-do Jewish person, you can move to Israel. You're under no real threat. You live a very happy, safe life in some part of the world. You can still go to Israel. That's clearly not the same as it would be for an Arabic person or whatever, right? Some other ethnicity. That's ethno-nationalism, man. That's a two-rail citizenship system. It is apartheid.
Okay. You're allowed
Last
as a
response
country.
and closings, but go ahead.
Yeah, you're allowed as a country to choose who you want to come into your country. That is not an example of apartheid. When we talk about apartheid, apartheid is about the lived reality of your citizens once they are citizens. That is a different thing than who you choose to bring into the country. It is not classist to say that we only want doctors and nurses and engineers and shit to come into our country. That's not classist. That's acceptable. That's perfectly legitimate for a country to do. You're allowed to do that. You can be conscious and choosy, picky about who you do and don't want to bring in.
But you
And
haven't put
hold
a
up.
check the doctors.
Let me finish. And so
Yeah,
when you are choosing who you bring in, that is ethical. The fact that Israel has consciously chosen and spent billions of dollars to do so, and risked their relationship with Ethiopia to do so, risked their standing within the rest of the Middle East to do so. The fact that they've saved literally hundreds of thousands, at this point over 1 million Jews by bringing those Jews into Israel, okay, is not something that they ought to be condemned for, and it is not apartheid to be trying to save Jews. That's not true. We can call it
Okay.
we can call it.
Can I just get back on one? I mean, this is quite a big thing, but I do need to push back on this. When you were giving your potted history of the establishment of Israel, you failed to mention that it was also established through significant bloodshed and terrorism by Jewish terrorist gangs as well.
I fully agree.
There were bombs going off in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, long before Hamas were ever a thing.
Yes, that's true. There were terrorists on either side, and yes, that's absolutely true. For sure.
Gang, this has been quite the robust discussion. I appreciate both of these parties here for coming in and going through the points and having this talk. I want to allow them to tell people where they can find themselves, as well as give closing thoughts on this. And we're going to start with Quibbles, and we're going to let Kevin have the last word here. Quibbles, give where people can find you if they'd like to find you, and closing thoughts on the conflict and Israel as a whole. Go ahead.
Okay. At QuibbleC on various places. That's where you find me. My final thoughts. This is actually not to do with Israel-Palestine, so I apologize, but it is my final thought of the evening. Earlier today, I came into this rather frustrated, not at Kevin, but at Twitter, because I think that we're, and this isn't actually really something to do with Israel-Palestine, but I think that we are doing a bad job of thinking about the impacts of our rhetoric on Jews and Muslims specifically living in the United States and living outside of Israel-Palestine. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but since October 7th, there has been an increase of 337% in hate crimes against Jews and 180% against Muslims in the United States. I think that we need to understand that there are limitations on what are appropriate ways to speak about these kinds of issues and what are appropriate types of protests to engage in. So there has been very recently an example of someone or a group of people protesting outside of a shul, outside of a synagogue, a Jewish prayer space. And I think that we just need to have it as a blanket rule. Some things are off limits. I think that we just need to agree that protesting outside of a kindergarten is off limits, that protesting outside of a funeral is off limits. And I think that in addition to that, I would also add that just as a principle, that if you're the one who is burning a cross in front of a black church, you're in the wrong. if you're the one who is talking, making it impossible for people to pray to God in peace, you are in the wrong. And the stochastic terrorism conversation is often thrown around, and sometimes it's unfairly thrown around. But at the base level, it simply is true that the terrorism has increased against both Muslims and Jews. And if you are a decent person, you have to understand that that as a base level is bad. And so I would argue that, yeah, don't do that. Don't protest a mosque and don't protest a shul.
Can I just chip in?
Well-
Are you referring to the synagogue in Toronto specifically?
Yeah,
Yeah.
among others. Just as a general.
I don't
Yeah,
want to,
yeah.
again,
Well,
these are closing statements. Oh my God. But brief.
Okay, but okay, right. That was a group of actually largely Jewish people who were campaigning outside of that synagogue, and that was because there was a real estate company from Israel that was selling specifically houses in the West Bank to just Jewish people in Canada.
It's actually not true. But even if it were
Okay.
true, I would still be principally opposed to it. But it's actually not true. Those were in Tel Aviv. They were not in the West Bank.
Okay, I don't actually know. Kevin, you're up.
Yes. Okay. This was honestly a little bit cancerous. I feel dispirited, I think, albeit that this was a fun discussion. Anyway, let's get on to the thing. Israel is doing a genocide. It is an apartheid state. It needs to cease both of those things, and a two-state solution needs to be established. And if you found anything I had to say of worth or knowledge or just interesting, you can find me at KevinLogan1875 here on Twitch and on various other platforms. Peace.
Okay, thank you for being here. We're going to rate out. I'll see you guys later. Have a great day, Quibbles and Kevin, and peace out.
Oh, well.
Did you guys like that? Did you enjoy the content? Gang, if you enjoyed this content, hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that follow button if you're following me on Twitch or on Kick. I would really appreciate it. Subs, donos, super chats, all these things really help. I did get one super chat today. Let's read it. 𝕵𝖎𝖙 for $5 says, is the idea of Hamas honoring a ceasefire not pie in the sky? What is the guarantee that they won't attack Israel the next chance they get? Which that was brought up by the guest Quibbles himself, and it was discussed. But thank you for the $5. Gang, it is always a pleasure to do this. I thought about covering the State of the Union here coming up at the top of the hour, but gang, I am out of it. I am tired. My batteries are drained. So what we're going to do is we're going to rate out. We're going to go to Prime Kai, and I will talk to you guys later, okay? Join the Discord if you haven't joined the Discord. I love you all. I hope everyone has a great night. Wait, bye-bye. 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 Okay. See ya.